The night after my father's funeral, my sister handed me a bottle of vodka and said, "Let's stop fighting, for Dad." She hadn't spoken to me in 5 years. 5 years of silence, no calls, no birthdays, no holidays, no explanation for disappearing when our father had his first stroke, and I was the one sleeping in a hospital chair beside him. And now, she stood on my porch in the Oregon rain, mascara running just enough to look fragile, holding a crystal bottle that probably cost more than my monthly electric bill. I didn't drink it. That night, my fiancé Ethan came over to help me sort through the inheritance paperwork. He poured a small glass. Just one. He said we both needed something to take the edge off. 40 minutes later, he was on my kitchen floor, his body convulsing, his pulse racing so violently I could see it jump in his neck. When I looked at Madison and said, "He drank the vodka you gave me," she didn't cry. She went silent. Then she panicked. The sound Ethan made when he hit the tile is something I still hear when the house is too quiet. A sharp crack of bone against ceramic, followed by the metallic rattle of the bar stool tipping over, his glass shattered beside him. The vodka spread across the floor in a thin, clear sheet that smelled faintly bitter, sharper than it should have. "Ethan!" I dropped to my knees, my training taking over before the fear could, roll him to his side, check airway, count breaths. His chest jerked in uneven spasms. His eyes were open but unfocused. Madison hovered near the doorway between the kitchen and living room, one hand over her mouth. "Oh my God! Oh my God, what's happening?" "You tell me," I snapped, already pulling my phone from my pocket. I hit 911 and spoke in a voice that had once called in coordinates under fire. Calm, precise, male, early 40s, sudden seizure, irregular heartbeat, possible ingestion. The operator asked what he had consumed. "Vodka," I said, staring straight at my sister. "From a bottle my sister brought." Madison's eyes flicked to the counter. It's just alcohol. Maybe he hasn't eaten." "He had dinner with me 2 hours ago." Ethan's body arched again. His hand clawed at my sleeve. His pulse under my fingers felt wrong, too fast. Not just panic fast, dangerous fast. The sirens arrived within minutes, red light washing through the front windows and across the framed photos of my father in uniform, my mother smiling before cancer took her, Madison and me as teenagers with braces and bad haircuts. Paramedics moved with practiced efficiency, lifting Ethan onto a stretcher, attaching monitors. One of them asked, "Anyone else drink from that bottle?" Madison answered too quickly. No, she didn't. Riley didn't drink any." The medic looked at me. "Ma'am?" "I didn't," I confirmed. "He poured the first glass." Madison's shoulders sagged with something that wasn't relief for Ethan. They carried him out into the rain. I followed, barefoot, not remembering when I'd kicked off my shoes. The cold pavement bit into my feet as they loaded him into the ambulance. "I'm riding with him," I said. Madison hesitated only a second. "I'll follow in my car." Inside the ambulance, the air smelled like antiseptic and adrenaline. A paramedic called out numbers. Blood pressure unstable, heart rate erratic. They asked again what he'd taken. "Just vodka," I said. "Nothing else." "Any medications? Recreational drugs?" "No." But my mind was already running ahead, scanning details like it used to scan desert roads for disturbed sand. The taste Ethan had mentioned. The way Madison kept asking if I'd had any. At the hospital, they rushed him straight into the emergency room. I stood in the hallway, hands shaking only after the doors swung closed. Madison appeared beside me, rain still clinging to her coat. "Riley, I swear, I bought that at Duty Free in Seattle." "It's expensive stuff. It wouldn't—" "Where exactly did you buy it?" I asked. She blinked. "At the airport." "Which store?" "I don't remember the name. Does that matter right now?" "It matters." She stared at me like I'd just betrayed her instead of the other way around. "Your fiancé is in there fighting for his life and you're interrogating me?" I stepped closer, lowering my voice. "You've asked 3 times whether I drank any." Her face drained of color. I was worried about you." A nurse came out and told us they were running tests. His heart rhythm was severely abnormal. They were stabilizing him. Did he have any heart conditions? She asked. No, I said. Madison spoke over me. She does. The nurse looked between us. She? My sister, Madison clarified quickly. Riley has blood pressure issues, PTSD, she's on medication. I felt something cold settle in my stomach. That's not relevant. The nurse nodded politely but scribbled something on her clipboard anyway. We were led to the waiting area. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead. A television in the corner ran a muted late-night news segment about rising housing prices. The world outside this building kept moving, indifferent. Madison sat across from me, knees bouncing. She kept checking her phone, typing rapidly, then deleting. Who are you texting? I asked. She locked the screen too fast. No one. I leaned back in the plastic chair and watched her. 5 years ago, she'd vanished. Said she needed space, needed to find herself. While I was the one driving our father to physical therapy after his first stroke. The one paying the utility bills when his pension paperwork got delayed. The one sitting through doctors explaining blocked arteries. And then today, at the funeral, she'd appeared in a black dress and trembling hands. The cemetery had been quiet except for the wind. I stood straight-backed as the flag was folded. Old habits, military composure. My father had been proud of that part of me. Madison had cried loudly, clinging to strangers like she was the one who'd been there every day. Afterward, when most people had drifted away with casseroles and polite condolences, she'd approached me near the car. I'm sorry, she'd said, eyes glossy. I shouldn't have left. I couldn't breathe here. You didn't call, I replied. I know. She held out the bottle then, wrapped in tissue paper. I brought this for you. To make peace. I'd almost laughed. Peace in a glass bottle. Now, hours later, that bottle sat in an evidence bag somewhere between my kitchen and the hospital lab. A doctor finally emerged from the double doors. Ms. Thompson? I stood instantly. Yes. Your fiancé is stable for now, but he experienced a severe cardiac arrhythmia and neurological symptoms consistent with toxin exposure. Toxin? Madison echoed faintly. We're running toxicology panels, the doctor continued. Did he ingest anything unusual? Vodka, I said again, from a sealed bottle. The doctor's gaze sharpened. Bring us the bottle if possible. It's at the house, I replied. My sister brought it. Madison's head snapped toward me. Riley! I didn't look at her. I'll call the police to secure it. The doctor nodded. Good. The sooner we identify the substance, the better. As he walked away, Madison grabbed my arm. You're not seriously suggesting I poisoned him. I'm suggesting, I said evenly, that something was in that bottle. Her eyes filled with tears. Why would I do that? I just buried our father. You tell me. The police arrived at the hospital within 30 minutes. An officer took my statement in a quiet consultation room. I described the bottle, the timing, the symptoms. Madison was questioned separately. Did anyone else handle the bottle? The officer asked me. Ethan opened it, I said, but Madison gave it to me. Was there any conflict between you and your sister recently? I hesitated. She's been gone for 5 years. That's not what I asked. I exhaled slowly. There were disagreements about family responsibilities before she left. Financial disagreements? The word hung between us. Our father had a will, I said carefully. I haven't reviewed the latest version yet, he nodded. We'll need access to your home to retrieve the bottle. I'll let you in. When I stepped back into the waiting area, Madison was standing near the vending machines, whispering into her phone. I don't know yet, she said. No, she didn't drink it. I told you. She froze when she saw me. The phone lowered slowly. Told who? I asked. No one, she said again, but her voice lacked conviction. What did you mean? She didn't drink it. Her jaw tightened. You're twisting everything. I held her gaze, searching for something familiar. A trace of the sister who used to steal my sweaters and beg me not to tell Dad when she missed curfew. All I saw was calculation. An officer approached with a plastic evidence bag. Inside, through the clear crinkle of sealed plastic, I saw the crystal bottle, the cap slightly askew. "We recovered this from your residence," he said. "We'll send it for analysis." Madison stared at it like it might explode. "Did you purchase this?" the officer asked her. "Yes," she whispered, "as a gift." "Do you have the receipt?" "I threw it away." "Where?" "I don't remember." The officer made a note. After he left, Madison sank into a chair and finally began to cry. Loud, messy sobs that drew glances from strangers. I didn't move to comfort her. An hour later, a nurse returned. "He's regained partial consciousness, just briefly." I rushed to his bedside. Ethan's skin looked pale against the white sheets. Electrodes clung to his chest. His eyes fluttered open when he heard my voice. "Riley," he murmured. "I'm here." He swallowed. "She was watching." "Who?" "Your sister." His voice was thin but steady. "When I poured it, she kept looking at you, like she was waiting." "For what?" "For you to drink first." The words settled heavily between us. His eyelids drifted closed again as the sedation pulled him under. I stepped back into the hallway and found Madison staring at the floor. "He woke up," I said. She looked up quickly. "Is he okay?" "For now," she exhaled. "Thank God." I took one step closer. "He said you were watching him, waiting for me to drink." Her eyes widened. "That's insane." "Is it?" She shook her head vigorously. "You're in shock, that's all." Maybe I was. My father buried that afternoon, my fiancé fighting for his life that night, my sister reappearing with a peace offering that tasted bitter. But shock doesn't invent patterns. As I walked back toward the ICU doors, I heard her phone buzz again. She glanced at it, then quickly typed a response. I caught a glimpse of the contact name before she tilted the screen away. Vic. The doctor came out once more, his expression serious. "We found something unusual in his bloodstream," he said. "What?" I asked. "It's not consistent with alcohol alone." Madison's breathing hitched. The doctor continued, "This wasn't just vodka." And in that moment, standing under harsh hospital lights with my sister's mascara streaked down her cheeks and my father's funeral still clinging to my clothes, I knew one thing with absolute certainty. Madison hadn't come home to make peace. She had come home with a plan. The machines in the ICU didn't beep in rhythm. They stuttered, paused, then shrilled in uneven spikes that made my shoulders tighten every time. Ethan lay pale against the hospital sheets, electrodes mapped across his chest like coordinates. A thin line of oxygen tubing ran beneath his nose. His eyelids fluttered occasionally, but he didn't wake. I stood at the foot of the bed and watched the monitor instead of his face, heart rate still unstable, blood pressure fluctuating, numbers steadier than they had been in the ambulance, but not normal. A doctor in blue scrubs stepped inside and closed the door softly behind him. "Ms. Thompson," he said, voice low, "we've confirmed a toxic compound in his bloodstream." My jaw tightened. "What kind?" "We're still running the full panel, but preliminary results indicate aconitine." The word meant nothing and everything at the same time. It sounded clinical, sharp, final. "What is that?" I asked. "A plant-based toxin, extremely potent. It affects the heart and nervous system. Even small amounts can cause severe arrhythmia." "And alcohol?" I asked. "It can accelerate absorption, but this isn't alcohol poisoning." My hands curled into fists at my sides. "So someone put it in the bottle." He held my gaze. "This wasn't an accident." When he left, I exhaled slowly. Not relief, not fear. Something colder. Confirmation. Outside the ICU room, Madison stood by the vending machines again, pretending to read the back of a snack package. She looked up immediately when she saw me. "What did they say?" she asked. "They found a toxin." Her face drained of color. "A toxin? In what?" "In Ethan's blood." She blinked rapidly. "That's impossible. It was just vodka." "It was vodka," I said, "with something else in it." She crossed her arms over her chest. "Are you saying I did that?" I'm saying you're the one who brought it. She shook her head, tears gathering again. I bought it at the airport. It was sealed, I swear. Did you open it before giving it to me? No. Did you leave it anywhere unattended? I don't know, it was in my bag. In your bag, I repeated. Her voice rose slightly. Why are you looking at me like that? Because you've asked me 4 times if I drank any. Her lips parted, then pressed thin. I was worried about you. I stepped closer. Were you? Before she could answer, Detective Larson walked down the hallway toward us, coat draped over one arm. Mid-40s, tired eyes, the kind of man who'd seen enough to stop being surprised. Ms. Thompson, he said, nodding at me, we need to talk. Madison straightened. I'd like to hear this too. He gave her a measured look. Separately. She opened her mouth to protest, then shut it. For a moment, her composure cracked and something sharp flashed through her expression. Not grief, irritation. I followed Larson into a small consultation room. He closed the door. We've secured the bottle from your residence. And? Preliminary field test suggests contamination. With what? Likely the same compound found in your fiancé's blood. We'll confirm once lab results return. My pulse stayed steady. Training. Breathe slow. Ask clear questions. Who handled the bottle besides him? He asked. My sister gave it to me. Ethan opened it. And you? I didn't touch the rim. I didn't drink. He studied me. Your sister said the same. She emphasized that you didn't drink. I let that sit between us. She also mentioned you have blood pressure issues, he added. I met his eyes. That's private medical information. She offered it. Something inside me shifted another notch. Detective, I said carefully, my father's funeral was today. My sister reappeared after 5 years. She gave me a bottle of vodka as a peace offering. My fiancé drank from it and nearly died. And now you're telling me she's volunteering my medical history? He didn't answer that directly. Is there any financial dispute between you two? The question landed heavier than I expected. Our father had an estate, I said. I haven't reviewed the latest documents. She told us there were disagreements about inheritance. She's been gone, I replied. She wasn't here when Dad needed care. He scribbled something down. Were you aware of any recent changes to the will? No, he closed his notebook. We're treating this as a potential attempted homicide. The word settled into the room like smoke. And you're not ruling anyone out, I said. That's correct. Including me. When I stepped back into the hallway, Madison was pacing now. What did he ask you? She demanded. About the will. Her pacing faltered. The will? Yes. She looked away too quickly. Why would that matter? Why would you bring it up? I didn't, she snapped, then caught herself. I don't understand why this is turning into something criminal. It already is, I said quietly. A nurse approached us. He's asking for you. I went back into the ICU room alone. Ethan's eyes were open this time, clearer. Hey, I said, stepping beside the bed. He swallowed carefully. Feels like my heart's trying to outrun me. It's stabilizing. He studied my face. They say what it was? A toxin. His brow furrowed faintly. From the vodka? Yes. Silence stretched between us. She was watching, he said again, more firmly this time. I know. When I poured it, she moved closer, like she wanted a front row seat. My jaw tightened. And when you didn't drink, he added, voice weak but steady. She looked annoyed. I leaned down slightly. Don't push yourself. His fingers brushed mine. Be careful. I always am. When I left the room, Madison was gone. I found her near the elevators, phone pressed to her ear. No, not yet, she was whispering. They're still running tests. She froze when she saw me and turned away slightly. I'll call you back, she said quickly, ending the call. Who was that? I asked. A friend. Name. She gave me a look like I'd crossed a line. You don't get to interrogate me. I get to ask questions when my fiancé is poisoned. Her chin lifted. Maybe you should look closer to home. Meaning? You handle Dad's finances. You have access to everything. The accusation hung heavy. You think I poisoned my own fiancé? I asked. I'm just saying, she replied, shrugging slightly. People do strange things under stress. The coldness in her voice didn't match the tears still streaking her cheeks. Detective Larson approached again. Ms. Thompson, he said to Madison this time, we need to ask about where you purchased that bottle. She glanced at me once before following him. I watched her walk away and felt the old instinct return, the one that scanned desert rooftops and alley shadows, the one that trusted patterns over words. She wasn't afraid of losing Ethan. She was afraid of losing something else. Hours later, toxicology confirmed the compound. Aconitine. Not accidental, not naturally present in alcohol, intentionally introduced. Larson returned to the waiting area where I sat alone. Your sister says she bought the bottle at a duty-free store in Seattle 2 days ago, he said. Receipt? She claims she discarded it. Security footage? We're requesting it. He studied me again. She also mentioned your father revised his will 2 weeks before his stroke. I felt the air thin. I wasn't informed of that, I said. You might want to verify. He paused. One more thing. She inquired about your father's life insurance policy earlier this week. Why would she do that? She said she was helping with paperwork. I stared at the blank television screen across the room. Insurance, will changes, a poisoned bottle. Detective, I said slowly. If I had taken the first drink instead of Ethan... He nodded once. Given your medical history, it could have been fatal. I closed my eyes briefly. Madison had asked 4 times if I'd had any. She wasn't worried. She was checking the outcome. When Ethan drifted back to sleep, I stepped outside the hospital into the cold Oregon night. Rain had turned to sleet. The parking lot lights reflected off wet asphalt. Madison stood near her car, arms wrapped around herself. They're treating me like a suspect, she said when I approached. Are you? Her eyes flashed. How can you even ask that? Because someone tried to kill him. She shook her head, almost laughing. You always do this. Do what? Turn everything into a battlefield. My voice stayed level. This isn't a battlefield. It's a crime scene. She stared at me for a long moment. Then quietly she said, if you had just let things go, none of this would have happened. The words slid under my skin. Let what go? I asked. But she didn't answer. She got into her car and drove away. I stood there until her taillights disappeared. When my phone buzzed in my hand, I almost dropped it. A text from an unknown number. Stop digging. Another message followed immediately. Some things should stay buried with your father. I looked back at the hospital entrance, at the ICU floor glowing faintly through the windows. This wasn't grief spiraling out of control. This was layered, deliberate, and it wasn't finished. Because as I walked back inside, my phone buzzed again. One more message. Insurance paperwork takes time. I didn't reply. I didn't need to. For the first time since the funeral, my shock hardened into something sharper. Madison hadn't just brought a bottle of vodka to make peace. She had built a plan. And I had survived the first move. I went straight from the hospital to my father's estate attorney without going home. I was still wearing the same black dress from the funeral, the hem damp from Oregon rain, my hair pulled back tighter than usual. I hadn't slept, I hadn't eaten, but I needed paper more than rest. Harold Whitaker's office sat on the second floor of a brick building in downtown Eugene, the kind with frosted glass and brass lettering that hadn't changed in decades. My father trusted him. That mattered. His receptionist blinked when she saw me. Ms. Thompson, I'm so sorry for your loss. I need to see Mr. Whitaker. It's urgent. Something in my voice must have convinced her. She disappeared through a side door and returned moments later. He can see you now. Harold stood when I entered his office. Late 60s, silver hair, suspenders, reading glasses perched low on his nose. "Riley," he said gently, "I heard about Ethan. I'm glad he's stable." "Barely," I replied. "I need to see the latest version of my father's will." He paused just a fraction too long. "Of course," he said, moving toward his desk. "We finalized an updated draft recently." "Recently when?" 2 weeks before his stroke. My chest tightened. He never mentioned that. Harold lowered himself into his chair and opened a file folder. He requested revisions via email. "Email?" "Yes, from your address." The room felt suddenly smaller. "I didn't send any email," I said. He slid a printed document across the desk toward me. My name was typed neatly at the top. The will. My father's name beneath it, legal language, signature lines. I scanned quickly, then stopped. "This isn't right," I said. Harold adjusted his glasses. "What do you mean?" "It leaves everything to Madison. The house, his pension fund, the investment accounts, the life insurance beneficiary rights totaling $750,000, all transferred solely to Madison Thompson. No equal split. No mention of me." "That's impossible," I said flatly. 2 years ago it was divided evenly." He nodded slowly. "Yes, that was the original structure." "Then who authorized this?" "The email came from your account. It referenced a prior discussion." "I never discussed cutting myself out of my father's estate." Harold looked genuinely unsettled now. He turned his monitor toward me. An email thread appeared on the screen. From riley.thompson.official@mailsecure.com. Subject, urgent revision. I stared at it. "That's not my email address," I said. "You're certain?" "I don't use MailSecure. I use my personal domain." He clicked into the header details. Lines of routing data filled the screen. "Can you trace where it originated?" I asked. "I can attempt to." He leaned closer, scrolling through the metadata. His expression shifted. "It appears the login originated from Seattle," he said quietly. Seattle. Madison's apartment. "When was this sent?" I asked. He checked the timestamp. 10 days before your father's stroke." 10 days. "So, someone hacked your system," I said. He cleared his throat. "Our server was accessed remotely. We believed it was legitimate at the time because the credentials matched." "My credentials?" "Yes, your password was entered correctly." I felt my jaw tighten. I hadn't changed that password in years. "Do you have security footage?" I asked. "For after-hours entries?" "Yes." He hesitated, then nodded. "We do." He pulled up archived video from the night before the document was finalized. The screen flickered to grainy black and white footage of his office hallway. Timestamp in the corner. At 2:23 in the morning, a figure entered the frame. Baseball cap pulled low, oversized coat, head down. My pulse slowed instead of racing. The figure moved directly to Harold's office door. No hesitation, no searching. She knew exactly where to go. "How long was she inside?" I asked. Harold checked the footage. 8 minutes. The figure exited, cap still low, and disappeared down the hall. "She didn't force entry," I said. "No." "So she had access." Harold's lips pressed thin. "Can you enhance it?" I asked. "We can attempt to." Even without clarity, I recognized the posture, the height, the narrow shoulders. Madison. "She called me that week," Harold said slowly, as if remembering something uncomfortable. "Asking questions about probate timelines." "What kind of questions?" "How long after death the estate would clear. Whether beneficiary changes could be contested." I let that settle. "Did she ever come in person?" I asked. "Not during office hours." I reached into my purse and pulled out the sympathy card Madison had left on my kitchen counter after the funeral. "You deserve to relax," it read in her looping handwriting. I slid it across the desk. "Compare it," I said. Harold opened an older file from his cabinet. A birthday card Madison had once sent my father. Same exaggerated loops on the capital letters. Same slight tilt to the right. He held them side by side. They are remarkably similar, he admitted. Run a formal comparison, I said. He nodded. I leaned back in the chair and stared at the ceiling for a moment. She didn't just bring vodka, I murmured. Excuse me? She brought paperwork. Harold opened my father's financial activity logs on his computer. There were 2 withdrawals, he said, small enough not to trigger alerts. How much? $25,000 labeled consulting fee. Then another $10,000 2 weeks later. To whom? He clicked into the masked account details. The last 4 digits made my stomach drop. Those numbers were identical to the old joint account Madison once shared with her ex-husband. She tested access, I said. Harold removed his glasses and rubbed his eyes. Riley, if this is fraud, it is, he nodded slowly. There's something else, he added quietly. What? Your father seemed uneasy the last time he was here. He mentioned Madison had been asking about the life insurance payout. When? About a month before his stroke. The room felt too quiet. Did he express concern? I asked. He said she thought money equaled fairness. Fairness. I remembered that word. Madison had used it often growing up. It's not fair you get praised more. It's not fair Dad trusts you with things. It's not fair you left and came back decorated. She'd never seen my deployment as sacrifice. Only as attention. When exactly was the will finalized? I asked. Digitally signed 10 days before the stroke, hard copy placed in file. And the original? In our archive. Pull it. He retrieved the earlier version. Equal split. Both our names clearly typed. Dated 2 years ago. I took photos of both documents with my phone. This is forgery, I said. He didn't argue. Riley, he said carefully, if someone accessed our system and impersonated you, this becomes criminal. It already is. I stood. I'm forwarding everything to Detective Larson. He nodded again. I'll cooperate fully. As I reached the door, he spoke once more. Your father trusted you, he said quietly. He often said you were the stable one. The stable one. I stepped out into the cold Oregon air and let the door close behind me. The wind cut across my face, sharp and bracing. 10 days before his stroke, 2 withdrawals, a forged will, a bottle of vodka laced with aconitine. This wasn't grief. It was timing. My phone buzzed. Detective Larson. We're expanding the case, he said when I answered. Toxicology confirmed aconitine in the bottle. Lab found reseal marks on the cap. I have something for you, I replied. The will was altered from a Seattle IP address, likely Madison's apartment. He went silent for a second. That's significant. There's more, I said. Small transfers from my father's account to an account connected to her. Email me everything. I will. I ended the call and looked up at the gray sky. Madison hadn't come back to mourn. She'd come back to collect. And if I had taken that first drink instead of Ethan, the revised will would have left everything in her hands without question. My death, her inheritance, clean, efficient. Except she hadn't planned on one thing. I survived war zones. I survived grief. And I wasn't going to be erased by a glass of vodka in my own kitchen. As I walked toward my truck, the wind carried a faint smell of rain and snow. Behind me, inside Harold Whitaker's office, 2 versions of my father's legacy sat on his desk. One real, one forged. Madison thought she had rewritten the future. She forgot that paper leaves a trail, and I knew how to follow it. I brought my prescription bottles to Dr. Karen Holloway the morning after I left Harold Whitaker's office. The clinic smelled like antiseptic and burnt coffee. I hadn't changed out of yesterday's clothes. I didn't care. Dr. Holloway had treated me for years, through sleepless nights, blood pressure spikes, the steady management of PTSD that followed me home from the Gulf. She knew my baseline better than most people knew my face. What's going on? she asked as I set the orange pill bottles on her desk. "I need you to look at these." She picked up the first one, unscrewed the cap, and poured a few tablets into her palm. Her brow furrowed almost immediately. "These aren't the usual shape," she said. "That's what I thought." She compared the imprint code against her tablet. Her fingers moved quickly across the screen. "This isn't your prescribed dosage," she said quietly. "And this isn't even the same medication." My pulse didn't spike. It narrowed. "What is it?" I asked. "A beta blocker with a much stronger hypotensive effect. If taken in combination with alcohol, especially in someone with your history—" She didn't finish the sentence. "How severe?" I pressed. "It could cause a dangerous drop in blood pressure, loss of consciousness, cardiac complications." "Fatal?" I asked. She met my eyes. "Yes." The room went still. "These were filled at my usual pharmacy," I said. She checked the label. "Yes, but this isn't what we prescribed." "Could the pharmacy have made an error?" "It's possible," she said carefully, "but unlikely at this scale. The imprint codes don't match your chart at all." "When were these filled?" I asked. She scanned the label. 3 days before your father's funeral." 3 days. Madison had arrived the day before the funeral. "Run a lab analysis," I said. "I will, but Riley—" She hesitated. "Why are you asking this now?" "My fiancé is in the ICU," I said. "Poisoned with aconitine." Her eyes widened. "My God! And if I had taken the first drink instead of him," I continued, "with this in my system—" She exhaled slowly. "It would have been catastrophic." I stared at the pills in her hand. This wasn't improvisation. This was planning. I drove straight home after leaving her office. The house felt different the second I unlocked the door. Same furniture. Same faint scent of my father's old cologne lingering in the hallway. But something underneath had shifted. I walked to the kitchen first. The counter where the vodka had sat was wiped clean by forensics, but I could still see the faint outline where the bottle had rested. A thin circle in the wood grain. I opened the drawer beside the sink where I kept spare keys. Empty. I stood still for a moment. The spare key had always been there, since my father gave it to me after my first deployment. "Just in case," he'd said. Madison had helped clean the house the night before the funeral. She'd insisted on organizing my bedroom drawers while I was downstairs answering condolence calls. 10 minutes alone upstairs. I moved down the hallway to my bedroom. The bed was made, the dresser drawers aligned, but the small ceramic bowl on my nightstand was shifted slightly left. I always kept it centered. I opened the top drawer where I stored medications. The prescription bottle Dr. Holloway had just examined had been sitting right there. I knelt down and pressed my palm against the hardwood floor. No forced entry, no broken locks, just access. Someone hadn't broken in, they had walked in. My phone buzzed. Detective Larson. "Lab confirmed aconitine in the vodka," he said without preamble. "Concentration consistent with deliberate dosing." "I have something else," I replied. My medication was switched. Silence on the other end. "Explain," he said. I told him everything Dr. Holloway had said. "That escalates this significantly," he said. "We'll need to secure the pharmacy footage." "And the house," I added. "My spare key is missing." "I'll send a team." When I ended the call, I stood in my father's study. The desk drawer where I kept the insurance paperwork was slightly misaligned. I pulled it open. The life insurance policy was still there, $750,000. Beneficiary designation tied to the current will. If I died before probate was contested, the revised will would place everything in Madison's hands. No fight, no suspicion. A grieving sister who lost her father and her sibling in quick succession. Natural complications, sympathy, money. I ran my fingers along the edge of the policy page. There it was. A clause. In the event of death due to medical complication, payout expedited pending standard verification. Medical complication. With the wrong medication in my system and alcohol amplifying it, my collapse would have looked tragically plausible. My phone buzzed again. Unknown number. You should rest, Riley. I stared at the screen. Another message followed. Stress isn't good for your blood pressure. My jaw tightened. I typed nothing. Instead, I walked back into the kitchen and opened the cabinet under the sink. There, near the cleaning supplies, a faint bitter scent lingered. Not vodka, something sharper. I grabbed a plastic bag and carefully placed the dishcloth from the trash inside it. If she'd wiped the bottle before handing it to me, there might still be trace residue. A knock at the door interrupted my thoughts. Forensics. 2 technicians in gloves and boot covers. They dusted surfaces, checked the locks, downloaded security logs. The alarm was disabled with the correct code, one of them said. Only 3 people know it, I replied. Me, Ethan, and Madison. He nodded and photographed the keypad. Timestamp shows it was entered at 2:14 in the morning 2 nights ago, he added. 2:14. The night before Ethan collapsed. She hadn't just come to the funeral, she'd come prepared. After they left, the house felt too quiet. I sat at the kitchen table where Ethan had fallen. My father had once sat at this same table and told me, "You can't assume loyalty." I'd thought he meant soldiers. He'd meant blood. A memory surfaced uninvited. 6 months before his death, we'd been drinking coffee in this kitchen. Madison's restless, he'd said. She always is, I replied. She keeps asking about the life insurance, he'd added. She probably just wants clarity. He'd looked at me for a long moment. Clarity can turn into entitlement if you're not careful. I hadn't understood the weight in his voice. Now I did. My phone buzzed again. Detective Larson. Pharmacy footage shows your sister in the store the day your prescription was filled, he said. Did she pick it up? No, but she was near the drop-off counter for several minutes. Alone? Yes. She could have switched bottles in the parking lot, I said. That's one possibility. Run prints on the pill bottle, I added. We will. When I hung up, the sun had started to dip behind the trees. Shadows stretched long across the floor. Madison texted then. How is Ethan? I stared at the screen. Alive. Her reply came quickly. Thank God, I typed back. The doctors say if I had taken that first drink with my medication, I might not have survived. 3 dots appeared. Then disappeared. No response. Minutes later, another text from her. You're being dramatic. I set the phone down carefully. Dramatic, not shocked, not apologetic, dramatic. I stood and walked to the front door. Snow had begun to fall lightly, each flake quiet, precise, calculated, like the plan she'd constructed. Poison the vodka, swap the medication, forge the will, 3 layers, 3 safeguards. If one failed, another would hold. She hadn't accounted for one variable. Ethan loved me enough to pour first. As darkness settled, I replaced the front door lock myself. Metal scraped against metal, solid, secure. Inside, I turned off every light except the one in my father's study. I opened his safe and checked the contents. Insurance documents, original will copy, handwritten notes, everything still there. But the edges of the papers were slightly shifted. Someone had searched. Not for money, for evidence. I closed the safe and changed its combination. My phone buzzed one last time that night, from the same unknown number. You can still walk away. I stared at the message. Walk away from what? From attempted murder? From inheritance fraud? From a sister who had calculated my blood pressure into her timeline? I deleted the message. Then I turned off the phone entirely. For the first time since the funeral, I let myself say it out loud in the empty house. She meant to kill me. The words didn't echo. They settled. My sister hadn't brought vodka to make peace. She had brought a trigger, and she had pulled it with precision. But she'd miscalculated one thing. I don't miss details, not on the battlefield, not in my own home, and I was done being her blind spot. The doorbell rang at 9:47 in the evening. I wasn't expecting anyone. Snow had started again, soft and steady, coating the porch in a thin white layer. I had just finished checking the new lock for the third time when the chime cut through the quiet. I didn't turn on the porch light. Instead, I stepped to the side of the front window and lifted the curtain just enough to see. A man stood under the dim street lamp glow, hands in the pockets of a dark wool coat. Late 50s, maybe early 60s, clean-shaven, not nervous. He looked like someone who expected to be let in. I kept the door closed and spoke through it. "Can I help you?" "Riley Thompson?" he asked calmly. "Yes. My name is Victor Russo. We need to talk." The name hit something in my memory. Vic. Madison's phone. "I'm not interested," I said. "You will be," he replied. "This concerns your sister. And the insurance policy." My grip tightened on the edge of the door. I opened it halfway but kept the chain latched. "What do you want?" I asked. He didn't try to look past me, didn't scan the interior of the house, just met my eyes. "There's been a complication," he said. "Your fiancé survived." "That's not a complication," I said evenly. "That's a blessing." "For you," he replied. The cold air between us sharpened. "Say what you came to say," I told him. He glanced once at the street, then back at me. "Your sister owes approximately $400,000, he said. The number settled heavily. "Owes who?" I asked. "A private network. High-stakes sports betting. Offshore processing, but domestic collection." "Organized crime," I said. He gave a faint smile. "That's a dramatic word." "Try me." He didn't flinch. "She's been overextended for 18 months. The debt escalated. Interest compounds quickly in our line of business." "And this has what to do with me?" I asked. "You," he said, "were the collateral." The words didn't raise my heart rate. They slowed it. "She assured us," he continued, "that the inheritance would cover everything." "My father's estate?" "Yes." He was still alive when she promised that. Victor tilted his head slightly. His health was fragile. I let silence stretch between us. "She proposed a timeline," he went on. "Funeral, probate, transfer of assets, insurance payout." "She forged the will," I said. "Yes." He said it like he was confirming a delivery time. "And the vodka?" I asked. "That was her idea," he replied. "A layered plan." Layered. Poison, medication swap, forged will. "She was very thorough," he said. I stared at him through the gap in the door. "Why are you here?" I asked. "Because she assured us the matter would be resolved by now." "Resolved? That's what she told you?" I asked. "She said you wouldn't be an obstacle much longer." The cold didn't register anymore. "She intended for me to drink it," I said. "Yes." The word landed without hesitation. "And Ethan?" I asked. "Unintended variable." My jaw tightened. "You're admitting conspiracy to murder," I said. He shrugged lightly. "I'm explaining financial expectations." "And you think showing up at my house is wise?" "I think transparency is preferable to misunderstanding," he said. "The insurance payout was pledged as security. If the payout doesn't occur, other avenues are explored." "Are you threatening me?" I asked. "I'm informing you." Snow gathered on his shoulders, melting slowly into the wool. "She used the life insurance as collateral," I said. "Yes." "For a gambling debt?" "Yes." "How long has she been involved with your network?" 18 months seriously, longer casually. I thought about the timeline. 18 months ago, Madison had still been mostly silent, sporadic texts, occasional vague promises to visit. "She was confident," Victor added, "very confident. She believed the emotional timing would shield her from scrutiny." "Emotional timing," I repeated. "A father's funeral," he said quietly. "No one questions grief." My hand tightened on the doorframe. "She told you how?" I asked. "How what?" "How she would make it look natural." He didn't blink. "She researched compounds that mimic cardiac failure. She was aware of your blood pressure condition." The room behind me felt suddenly too small. She knew my medication schedule, I said. Yes. The word felt like a blade. She said alcohol would accelerate the effect, he added. If symptoms appeared shortly after the funeral, stress would be assumed. My father buried that morning, my body on that kitchen floor by night. She rehearsed narratives, Victor said, in case of investigation. What kind of narratives? I asked. That you were emotionally unstable, that you'd been drinking more since the funeral, that your health was deteriorating. I almost laughed. She was thorough, he repeated. Why are you telling me this? I asked again. He exhaled slowly. Because when operations attract federal attention, our interests change, he said. Your sister has become a liability. Because she failed. Yes. Because she failed to kill me. Yes. The directness of it almost impressed me. And what do you want from me? I asked. Clarity, he said. If the inheritance transfers, the debt can be resolved quietly. If it does not, other parties become impatient. I'm not negotiating with you, I said. I'm not asking you to. His eyes narrowed slightly. I'm advising you that your sister overpromised, and people who overpromise create pressure. On me, I asked. For now. I let the words settle. If you think intimidation will change anything, I said calmly, you miscalculated. His expression shifted just slightly. She said you were predictable, he said. What did she say? That you would fight emotionally first. That you would hesitate to involve federal authorities because of family loyalty. I smiled faintly. She misjudged that too. He studied me for a long moment. You don't seem surprised, he said. I served in the Gulf, I replied. Surprise is inefficient. A flicker of something like respect crossed his face. She believed the insurance payout of $750,000 would clear within weeks if death was ruled natural, he continued. Probate complications were accounted for. She intended to settle $400,000 immediately and negotiate the remainder. She used the word collateral, I said. Yes. Did she ever express regret? No. The answer came too fast to doubt. She said you always survived everything, he added quietly, and that this time you wouldn't. The words echoed in my mind. She always survives everything. I want proof, I said. He reached into his coat and removed a small envelope. I'm not foolish enough to carry originals, he said, but copies are instructive. I unlatched the chain and opened the door fully. He handed me the envelope. Inside were printed screenshots of text exchanges. Madison's name at the top. One message read, "Once Riley's gone, probate clears faster." Another, "She always survives everything. This time she won't." My stomach didn't drop. It solidified. You're handing me evidence, I said. I'm protecting my organization, he replied. Your sister's arrest jeopardizes more than her freedom. So you sacrifice her. She was already sacrificed the moment your fiancé lived. Snow thickened around us. You understand, he said, that if she's convicted, certain investors lose faith. I don't care, I said. You should. Why? Because desperation spreads. He stepped back from the porch. I've said what I came to say, he added. Your sister built a 3-layer plan. Poison, medication, forged will. It would have worked. But it didn't. No, he said softly. It didn't. He turned and walked toward a black sedan parked half a block away. I watched until he got in and drove off. Then I closed the door and locked it. Inside, the house felt heavier. I laid the envelope on the kitchen table. 3 layers. She had engineered my death like a project. Step 1, alter inheritance. Step 2, ensure death appears natural. Step 3, collect payout. The phone rang before I could sit down. Detective Larson. We've confirmed significant gambling transactions linked to Madison, he said. Offshore accounts, shell transfers. She used the insurance policy as collateral, I said. There was a pause. How do you know that? He asked. Victor Russo just left my porch. Silence. You let him leave? He asked. He came to talk. What did he say? Everything. I relayed the conversation. When I finished, Larson exhaled sharply. That escalates this into organized crime territory, he said. We'll involve federal agencies immediately. You should, I replied, because this isn't just family drama, it's financial conspiracy. Are you safe? He asked. Yes. But the word felt thinner than usual. After I hung up, I sat alone at the kitchen table. I looked at the screenshots again. She always survives everything. This time she won't. I thought about childhood winters when Madison used to accuse me of getting more praise. It's not fair. I thought about deployments, medals she called attention. It's not fair. I thought about my father trusting me with paperwork. It's not fair. Fairness had turned into entitlement. Entitlement had turned into calculation. Calculation had almost turned into my obituary. I folded the papers carefully and placed them inside a folder labeled evidence. War taught me something simple. You don't panic, you gather, you document, you dismantle. Madison didn't just gamble money, she gambled my life, and she expected to win. She forgot one thing: I don't fold under pressure, not in the desert, not in my own home, and certainly not because my sister decided I was collateral. I waited in the elementary school parking lot with the engine off and the heater running low. The late afternoon sky over Eugene was the color of wet concrete. Snow from the night before had melted into slush along the curb. Parents stood in small clusters near the entrance, checking their phones, waving at children spilling out of double doors. I hadn't told anyone I was coming, not Madison, not Lily's father. Just Detective Larson, who had nodded once and said, "Be careful what you ask." I wasn't here to interrogate an 11-year-old. I was here to listen. The doors burst open and children ran into the cold air, backpacks bouncing. I scanned faces automatically, the way I used to scan rooftops for movement. Then I saw her, Lily, dark hair pulled into a messy ponytail, pink jacket too thin for the weather. She spotted my truck and hesitated. For a second I thought she might turn away. Instead, she ran toward me. "Aunt Riley," she called, breath puffing white in the air. I stepped out of the truck before she reached me. "Hey," I said, forcing warmth into my voice. She hugged me tightly around the waist. "Is Uncle Ethan going to die?" she asked immediately. The directness knocked the air from my lungs. "No," I said gently. "He's stable. The doctors are taking care of him." She pulled back, searching my face. "Mom said it was just alcohol." "It wasn't," I said carefully. Her brow furrowed. "Is he really going to be okay?" "Yes." That part, at least, was true. "Can we get hot chocolate?" she asked quietly. "Mom's been busy." I nodded and opened the passenger door. We drove to a small cafe 3 blocks away, the kind with chipped wooden tables and chalkboard menus. I chose a booth near the back where conversations blurred into background noise. She wrapped her hands around the paper cup like it was an anchor. For a few minutes, we talked about safe things: school, her science project, a girl in her class who cheated during a spelling test. Then she went quiet. "Mom's really mad," she said softly. "At you?" I asked. "No." She stared into her cup. "At everyone." I let silence stretch. Silence invites truth. "She keeps talking on the phone at night," Lily continued. "In the kitchen. She thinks I'm asleep." "What does she say?" I asked. Lily shrugged at first. "Stuff about insurance," she said. My pulse slowed, sharpened. "What kind of stuff?" I asked gently. "She said insurance clears fast," Lily replied, "and that once you're gone, things will be easier." The cafe noise faded into a dull hum. "What exactly did she say?" I asked, keeping my tone even. Lily chewed her lip. She said, "Once Riley's gone, probate clears faster." The words echoed the screenshot Victor had handed me. "Did she say that more than once?" I asked. "Yeah," Lily nodded. "She said it to a man named Vic." My hand tightened around my cup. "How do you know his name?" I asked. "She said it a lot," Lily replied. "Like, Yes, Vic, it's almost done. Almost done. When did she say that? I asked. Before Grandpa's funeral, and after. Lily looked up at me suddenly. Are you mad at Mom because of Grandpa's money? She asked. The question cut deep. I'm upset because someone tried to hurt Ethan, I said carefully. She nodded slowly. Mom said we'd be rich before Christmas, she added. The cafe felt colder. She said we'd move somewhere bigger, Lily continued. She showed me houses online. Did she ever talk about how that would happen? I asked. She said insurance, Lily said again, and that you wouldn't need anything anymore. I kept my breathing steady. Did she tell you not to talk about the bottle? I asked. Lily's fingers tightened around her cup. She said if anyone asked, I should say I didn't see anything, she whispered. My jaw clenched. Did you see anything? I asked. She hesitated. I saw her with the bottle in the kitchen before she gave it to you, Lily said. She was holding it and looking at it. Did she open it? I asked. I don't know, Lily replied, but she had it out of the bag. I leaned back slightly. Did she ever talk about my medicine? I asked. Lily's eyes widened faintly. She said you take stuff for your heart, she said, and that alcohol would make it worse. My throat went dry. When did she say that? I asked. On the phone, Lily said, to Vic. The pieces were aligning with brutal precision. She said stress would make it look natural, Lily added quietly. I swallowed. Did she ever say anything about Ethan? I asked. She said he wasn't supposed to drink it, Lily replied. The cafe noise came rushing back all at once. Did she say that exactly? I asked. Yes. Lily looked confused now. I thought she meant you were supposed to have it first, she said. I forced my expression not to change. Did she ever tell you to practice saying something? I asked. Lily nodded slowly. She said if police asked, I should say we haven't seen you much, she whispered. Even though we did. My phone vibrated on the table. Madison. I let it ring once, then answered and placed it on speaker without announcing it. Lily? Madison's voice came through tight. Where are you? With Aunt Riley, Lily replied. Silence. Then, did you tell her anything? Lily glanced at me. No, she said softly. Madison exhaled audibly. Good. We're almost safe, she murmured. The line went dead. Almost safe. I ended the call and looked at Lily. Sweetheart, I said gently, you didn't do anything wrong. She stared at the table. I don't want Mom to go to jail, she whispered. The words hit harder than anything else she'd said. I don't want that either, I replied honestly. But she said if you died, everything would belong to us, Lily added, voice trembling, and we wouldn't have to worry anymore. I reached across the table and covered her hand with mine. Money doesn't fix worry, I said quietly. She nodded, eyes glossy. She's been really scared lately, Lily added, like someone's watching her. That part didn't surprise me. When did she start acting like that? I asked. After the hospital, Lily said. She kept checking the windows. I thought about Victor's visit, about federal involvement, about pressure from both sides. Lily, I said carefully, if someone asks you what you told me today, you tell the truth, okay? She nodded. Even if Mom gets mad? Especially then. She looked down at her cup. She said you always win, Lily murmured. The phrase echoed again. You always win. I paid the bill and walked her back to my truck. The drive to Madison's apartment was quiet. When we pulled up, Madison was already outside, arms folded tightly. Her eyes flicked from Lily to me. You shouldn't be taking her without asking, she said. She wanted hot chocolate, I replied evenly. Madison crouched slightly in front of Lily. Did you tell her anything? She asked softly. Lily looked between us. I told the truth, she said. Madison's jaw tightened. I met her gaze over Lily's head. You told her we're almost safe, I said quietly. Her eyes flashed. You're twisting everything, she snapped. I leaned closer, keeping my voice low. You rehearsed narratives. You studied my medication. You altered the will. Her face drained of color. You have no proof, she whispered. I straightened. I have more than you think. She stood slowly, pulling Lily closer. This is harassment, she said loudly now. You're traumatizing my daughter. You did that, I replied calmly. Her expression shifted, anger rising, composure thinning. You always had to be the hero, she said. Even now. I didn't respond, because for the first time, I wasn't trying to be a hero. I was trying to stop a cycle. Lily squeezed my hand briefly before stepping inside with her mother. Madison lingered a second longer. You could still walk away, she said quietly. From what? I asked. From all of this. I held her gaze. You tried to kill me, I said softly. Her eyes flickered. No, she said. I tried to fix things. Then she went inside. I sat in my truck for a long moment after the door closed. Snow began falling again, light and steady. I pulled out my phone and called Detective Larson. I have more, I said when he answered. I told him everything Lily had said. He was silent for a moment. That corroborates Victor's statement, he said. She told Lily I wouldn't last long, I added. That's powerful testimony, he replied. But she's a child. I know. Would you be willing to document the conversation? Yes. When I ended the call, I looked up at the apartment window. Madison moved behind the curtain. For years, I'd been the one who shielded her from consequences, covered for her, explained away her impulses. Now her own daughter had exposed the truth. I started the engine. For the first time since the funeral, I felt something shift inside me. Not rage, not revenge. Resolve. This wasn't just about me surviving. It was about making sure Lily never learned that entitlement was love. And as I drove away, I understood something clearly. Madison hadn't just gambled with money. She had gambled with the future of her own child, and that was a debt far bigger than $400,000. The house felt wrong the second I unlocked the door. Not loud wrong, not obvious, subtle. The air was colder than I'd left it. The faint scent of my father's old pipe tobacco, which usually lingered near the study, seemed diluted. I stepped inside and closed the door quietly behind me. The porch light was on. I was certain I'd turned it off. I didn't move immediately. I listened. The refrigerator hummed. The heater clicked softly. No footsteps, no shifting floorboards. Still, something felt disturbed. I moved the way I used to in unfamiliar buildings overseas. Slow, deliberate. Clear the space before claiming it. The living room looked untouched, couch aligned, blankets folded. But the throw pillow in the corner chair was angled slightly to the left instead of centered. It was a small thing. Small things matter. I moved down the hallway. My bedroom door was slightly ajar. I never leave it open. My pulse didn't spike. It narrowed. I pushed the door wider with my fingertips. The room was intact, bed made, closet closed. No drawers dumped on the floor. But the closet door track had a faint scrape along the bottom edge, like it had been slid open too quickly. I stepped inside and opened the dresser. The top drawer was aligned, but the edges of folded shirts were disturbed. Someone had rifled without disarray. That takes practice. I crossed to the nightstand. The ceramic bowl was back in the center now. Too perfect. I crouched and looked beneath the bed. Nothing. I stood and moved toward the study. The chair behind my father's desk was pulled out slightly, barely an inch. He used to align it exactly flush with the desk. I had kept it that way. Not tonight. I approached the security monitor near the hallway. The system showed normal activity. Front door locked, back door secure. I opened the alarm log. 2:14 in the morning. System disarmed. Correct code entered. No forced override. The same timestamp Larson had mentioned earlier. 2:14, the night before Ethan collapsed. My spare key had gone missing. Now the code had been used. I scrolled further. System armed again at 2:27. 13 minutes inside. Enough time. Enough precision. I walked to the back door and examined the frame. No splintering, no scratches. Whoever entered knew how to leave cleanly. My phone buzzed. Unknown number again. Stop digging. I didn't respond. Another message followed. You don't know who you're dealing with. I stared at the screen for a long moment before setting the phone down on the desk. The study window faced the street. I stepped closer and peered through the glass. A dark SUV sat parked across from the house, engine off. I couldn't see inside. It hadn't been there earlier. I memorized the plate number without thinking. Years of practice. I moved back from the window and turned off the study light. Let them wonder if I'd seen. My phone vibrated again. A call this time. The hospital. I answered immediately. This is Riley. Ms. Thompson, the nurse said. A man attempted to access Mr. Miller's room about 20 minutes ago. My body went still. What man? He claimed to be a cousin. His name didn't match the approved list. Description? Mid-40s, dark coat. He left when security asked for identification. Did he see Ethan? No. I exhaled slowly. Did he say anything? I asked. He asked whether Mr. Miller was conscious yet. The SUV outside my house. A man at the hospital. Pressure. Thank you, I said and ended the call. I dialed Larson immediately. Someone tried to access Ethan's room, I said. I'm aware, he replied. Security notified us. And there's a vehicle outside my house. Stay inside, he said. I'm dispatching a unit. I didn't argue. Instead, I walked back into the kitchen. The counter where the vodka had sat was empty now, stripped by forensics. But under the cabinet, I caught a faint chemical smell again. Bitter. Metallic. I crouched and ran my fingers along the underside of the counter. Dust had been disturbed recently. Someone had braced themselves there. I stood and moved to the trash bin. Empty. Too empty. I always leave at least one bag liner tucked at the bottom. Gone. I walked back toward the hallway when headlights flashed briefly through the front window. Police. The SUV's engine roared to life and pulled away before the patrol car reached the curb. I watched through the sliver of curtain. The SUV turned the corner smoothly. Not rushed. Controlled. A knock came at the door. I opened it to two uniformed officers. Ma'am, are you alone? One asked. Yes. They stepped inside and swept the perimeter quickly. Vehicle took off when we turned onto the block, the other said. Plate comes back to a rental agency in Tacoma. Under what name? I asked. False identification. The ID number belongs to a deceased individual. Organized. They documented everything. Alarm logs, security footage. The muddy footprint near the back door I hadn't noticed before. Size smaller than mine. Could be Madison. Could be someone she sent. After they left, the house felt even more hollow. I turned off every light except the lamp in the study. I opened the safe again. The documents were still there. But the edges of the insurance policy had shifted slightly since the last time I checked. Someone had handled them. I removed everything and laid it on the desk. The original will, my father's notebook. The envelope labeled, "Open if trust is broken." They hadn't taken anything. They had searched. For evidence. My phone buzzed again, this time a voice message, distorted. You're costing people money. Click. I deleted it without replaying. War taught me something simple. Fear is a tool. I walked through the house one more time. Bedroom, closet, bathroom, kitchen. Every room held the faint imprint of intrusion, not chaos, measurement. Whoever had entered wasn't stealing valuables. They were calculating how much I knew. I paused in the hallway, staring at the family photos. One of Madison and me as children stood crooked. I straightened it carefully. Snow tapped softly against the windows. I moved to the front door and replaced the secondary lock with a reinforced deadbolt I'd picked up earlier that afternoon. Metal slid into place with a solid click. Secure. I walked back into the study and shut the curtains fully. Then I sat in my father's chair and let the silence settle. A memory surfaced. Night patrol in the desert. We had cleared a building after intelligence suggested insurgents were inside. Nothing, empty rooms. But something felt wrong. We found the hidden compartment 2 hours later. Patience reveals what panic misses. This wasn't random intimidation. This was an attempt to push me off course, to make me hesitate, to make me feel unsafe in my own home. They underestimated something. I don't abandon ground. My phone buzzed again. Larson. FBI is stepping in, he said. Interstate financial fraud and attempted homicide connected to organized betting. You'll have surveillance support. Good, I replied. Are you shaken? He asked. No. That wasn't entirely true, but I wasn't shaken in the way they wanted. I was focused. They're trying to intimidate you, he said. They're trying to see how close I am, I replied. There was a pause. That's exactly what this is, he said. After I hung up, I opened my laptop and documented everything. Timestamp, vehicle description, hospital incident, text messages, every detail. The more light I shone on it, the less power it held. Around midnight, the street outside grew quiet again. No engines, no headlights, just snow. I stood at the window one last time before heading to bed. The yard looked untouched, white, still. But I knew better. Footprints melt, logs erase, messages delete, but patterns remain. And whoever walked through my house that night wasn't stealing. They were measuring. Measuring how far I'd gone. Measuring how much I'd uncovered. Measuring how difficult it would be to stop me. I turned off the final lamp and let the house fall into darkness. If they thought fear would slow me down, they miscalculated. I've walked through real war zones. A shadow on my porch doesn't compare. They wanted me to stop digging. Instead, they confirmed I was exactly where I needed to be. The federal building in downtown Portland didn't look dramatic from the outside. Gray concrete. Narrow windows. A flag snapping in the winter wind. But inside, everything felt heavier. 2 agents met me in a small conference room with no windows and a single camera mounted in the corner. Special Agent Daniel Hayes, Special Agent Monica Ruiz, both calm, both watching everything. Ms. Thompson, Hayes began, sliding a legal pad across the table. We appreciate your cooperation. I want this finished, I replied. Ruiz opened a folder thick with printed documents. We've confirmed communication between your sister and Victor Russo dating back 18 months. Gambling debt? I asked. Yes. How much? Approximately $400,000 principal. Interest fluctuated. And she pledged my father's insurance policy as collateral, I said. Hayes nodded once. That appears accurate. I placed the screenshots Victor had given me on the table. Ruiz studied them carefully. These align with what we've pulled from her cloud backup, she said. She didn't wipe it? I asked. She tried, Hayes replied, but partial data remained. I leaned back slightly. What about the IP address from the forged will? I asked. We traced it to her Seattle apartment, Ruiz said. 2 separate logins into the attorney's server. And the security footage? I asked. Hayes tapped the folder. We enhanced it. It's her. No hesitation in his voice. Has she been questioned? I asked. Not yet, Ruiz said. We're building enough to prevent a simple denial strategy. I nodded. What about the pharmacy? I asked. Surveillance shows her near the counter when your prescription was processed, Hayes said, and we recovered partial fingerprints from the swapped bottle. Her prints? I asked. Mixed, Ruiz said, but hers are present. The air felt sharp and clinical. And Victor? I asked. He's cooperating, Hayes said. I almost laughed. Self-preservation, Ruiz added calmly. He confirmed the 3-layer plan? I asked. Yes, Hayes replied. Poison in the vodka, medication tampering, forged inheritance documents. And the timing? I asked. Funeral, Ruiz said. High emotional cover, reduced suspicion. I stared at the tabletop for a moment. She researched aconitine online, Hayes continued. Search terms include dosage thresholds and cardiac mimicry. How long? I asked. 2 months. 2 months, while texting condolences, while pretending to reconnect. She called the insurance company twice under the pretense of helping with paperwork, Ruiz added. I closed my eyes briefly. How soon are you moving? I asked. Hayes exchanged a look with Ruiz. Soon, he said, but we need one more piece. What? I asked. Recorded intent, Ruiz said. I opened my eyes. She's not stupid, I said. No, Hayes replied, but pressure changes behavior. They leaned forward slightly. We need you to meet with her, Ruiz said. The words didn't surprise me. You want me to wear a wire, I said. Hayes didn't blink. Yes. I exhaled slowly. And provoke her into admitting it. Encourage clarity, Ruiz corrected. I thought about Lily, about the hospital, about the SUV outside my house. What's the risk? I asked. She's under surveillance, Hayes said, but we can't guarantee she won't react unpredictably. She already has, I replied. Ruiz slid a small device across the table. Non-visible, audio only. I picked it up. It was lighter than I expected. Where? I asked. She suggested meeting tomorrow evening at your father's house, Hayes said. She called you? I asked. She contacted you through text, Ruiz corrected gently. We intercepted. I checked my phone. A message from Madison sat unopened. We need to talk, alone. I looked back up. She thinks she can control the narrative, Hayes said. She always has, I replied. Ruiz studied me carefully. Are you emotionally prepared? She asked. I buried my father, I said. I watched my fiancé seize on my kitchen floor. I'm past unprepared. Silence hung for a moment. Hayes nodded once. We'll position agents nearby, he said. But the goal is voluntary admission. I slid the device into my coat pocket. What if she doesn't confess? I asked. Ruiz met my gaze. She will. I left the building with a new weight in my pocket and a colder clarity in my chest. Snow drifted sideways across the parking lot. The city felt distant, muted. When I got back to the hospital, Ethan was sitting up slightly in bed. Where'd you go? He asked softly. Federal meeting, I replied. He raised an eyebrow weakly. That escalated. It needed to. I sat beside him. They know, I said. He watched my face. Know what? He asked. Everything. His hand found mine. She meant for you to drink it, he said quietly. Yes. And she meant for it to look natural. Yes. He closed his eyes briefly. You're going to meet her, aren't you? Yes. His grip tightened slightly. Be careful. I always am. Back home, I prepared the house like I used to prepare briefing rooms. No clutter, no loose distractions. I placed my father's original will on the desk deliberately. The forged copy beside it. Insurance documents aligned. Let her see what I knew. My phone buzzed. Madison, tomorrow, 8. Dad's house, I typed back. Fine. Her response came instantly. Alone. I didn't answer. Instead, I opened the safe and removed the envelope my father had labeled "Open if trust is broken." I hadn't read it yet. I opened it slowly. Inside was a single page. If either of you ever try to destroy the other over money, you've already lost. He had underlined lost. My chest tightened briefly. Too late. The next evening arrived faster than expected. I attached the recording device beneath the collar of my sweater. Tested it once. Hayes's voice came faintly through the earpiece. Signal clear. I nodded slightly. The house felt colder than usual. Snow layered the yard thickly now. At 7:58, headlights swept across the front window. Madison's car. She stepped onto the porch alone. No tears this time. No mascara streaks. Just calculation. I opened the door before she knocked. You wanted to talk, I said. She stepped inside slowly. Her eyes scanned the room. You changed the locks, she said. Yes. Her gaze landed on the desk in the study. On the documents. You've been busy, she murmured. I have. She walked into the study without invitation. "You always loved this room," she said. "It's where Dad trusted me," I replied. Her jaw tightened. "Still playing the favorite," she said. I leaned against the doorway. "You tried to kill me," I said calmly. Her lips curved faintly. "Don't be dramatic." "The vodka was laced with aconitine." Silence. "My medication was switched." Her eyes flickered briefly. "You forged the will." She stepped closer to the desk. "You think you're so smart," she said softly. "I know you researched cardiac mimicry." Her gaze snapped to mine. "You always had to be better," she whispered. "Better at what?" I asked. "At surviving," she snapped. The word echoed. "You pledged the insurance as collateral," I continued. She laughed once, sharp. "You weren't supposed to notice." There it was, a small crack. "You weren't supposed to survive," she added. The words hung in the air like smoke. Hayes's faint voice buzzed in my ear. "Stay calm." "You rehearsed narratives," I said. "I had to," she replied. "You would have fought." "Yes," I said. "I would have." She stepped closer now. "Do you know what it feels like," she said, voice low, "to always come second?" "This isn't about second," I replied. "It is," she hissed. "Dad trusted you with everything, the money, the house, the attention." "He trusted responsibility," I said. She laughed again. "You call it responsibility. I call it control." "You tried to take control by killing me," I said. Her face hardened. "I tried to fix a problem," she snapped. "With poison." "With opportunity," she corrected coldly. The words felt surgical. "You would have died peacefully," she continued. "Stress, blood pressure, alcohol, no one would have questioned it." "And Ethan?" I asked. "He poured too soon." No remorse. None. "You were collateral," she added quietly. The word echoed Victor's. "You always survive everything," she said. "This time you weren't supposed to." I met her gaze steadily. "You miscalculated." Her eyes flicked briefly toward the hallway. "You think you've won," she said. "I think you've confessed." Her face changed, a flicker of realization. The front door opened behind her. Footsteps. Hayes's voice, no longer distant. "Madison Thompson, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder, financial fraud, identity theft, and related federal offenses." She turned slowly. Agents filled the doorway. Her shoulders stiffened. For a second she looked at me, not with anger, not with regret, with disbelief. "You set me up," she said. "No," I replied quietly. "You built it yourself." They cuffed her without resistance. As they led her toward the door, she stopped once more. "You always win," she whispered. I didn't answer. Because this wasn't winning, it was ending something that should never have started. The door closed behind them. Snow fell steadily outside. Inside, the house felt quieter than it had in days. Not empty, not hollow, just still. The war in my family had moved from shadows into evidence. And this time, she didn't control the narrative. This time, it was on record. The interrogation room was colder than I expected. Not physically, emotionally. Gray walls, metal table bolted to the floor. A camera in the upper corner blinking red. Madison sat with her hands cuffed in front of her, posture straight, chin lifted like she was attending a board meeting instead of facing federal charges. I watched from behind the two-way mirror. Hayes and Ruiz entered without rushing. They sat across from her, placed a recorder on the table, and began. "Madison Thompson," Hayes said calmly, "you understand you're being recorded." "I want a lawyer," she replied immediately. "You'll have one," Ruiz said. "Before that, we're offering you the opportunity to clarify certain facts." Madison leaned back slightly. "There's nothing to clarify," she said. Ruiz slid a printed transcript across the table, highlighted in yellow. "You weren't supposed to survive." Madison's eyes flicked down for half a second. Then back up. "You recorded me," she said, almost impressed. "Yes," Hayes replied. She inhaled slowly. Context matters, she said. Then give us context, Ruiz replied. Madison glanced toward the mirror. For a split second I thought she knew I was there, but she couldn't, could she? You're twisting a private argument, Madison said. My sister has always been dramatic. Hayes didn't blink. You researched aconitine, he said, for 2 months. Silence. You logged into her attorney system from your apartment, Ruiz added. Twice. Madison's jaw tightened. You switched her prescription medication, Hayes continued. Your fingerprints are on the bottle. She exhaled sharply. You can't prove that, she said. We can, Ruiz replied calmly. Hayes slid another sheet forward. Bank transfers, gambling transactions, offshore accounts, $400,000 owed. Madison stared at the numbers. Financial stress doesn't equal murder, she said. No, Hayes agreed, but financial stress combined with poison and a forged will does. Madison's composure flickered for the first time. You don't understand, she said quietly. Help us, Ruiz replied. She laughed once, hollow. Help you? She said. You think this is about you? Hayes leaned forward slightly. Tell us what it's about. She hesitated. For the first time, her hands trembled slightly against the metal cuff. She always had everything, Madison said. Your sister? Ruiz asked. Yes. She had discipline, Hayes said. She had responsibility. She had attention, Madison snapped. Dad worshipped her. I watched through the glass, my chest steady. He trusted her, she continued. He gave her control of the finances, the house, the paperwork. Because you left, Ruiz said quietly. I needed space, Madison shot back. You needed money, Hayes corrected. Silence. Madison looked at the table again. You don't know what it feels like, she said, to always be the second choice. This isn't about childhood, Hayes replied. It is, she insisted. It's always been. Ruiz folded her hands calmly. Did you put aconitine in the vodka? She asked directly. Madison looked up slowly. No. Did you switch her medication? Hayes asked. No. Did you alter the will? Ruiz asked. Silence. Her breathing changed slightly. I asked about probate timelines, she said carefully. That's not illegal. You impersonated your sister, Hayes said. I sent an email, she corrected. That's not murder. Hayes slid the enhanced security image across the table. Her figure, baseball cap, entering Whitaker's office at 2:23 in the morning. Madison's lips parted. That's not clear, she said. It's you, Ruiz said quietly. Silence again. Through the glass, I watched her posture shift. Not collapse, recalculate. You don't have proof I poisoned anything, she said finally. Hayes leaned back slightly. Victor Russo does. That name landed harder than anything else. Her eyes flashed. He's lying, she said immediately. He's cooperating, Ruiz corrected. He's protecting himself, Madison shot back. Yes, Hayes agreed. And you're protecting yourself. Madison's jaw clenched. You don't get it, she whispered. Then explain, Ruiz said. Madison looked toward the mirror again. For a brief second, her gaze felt like it pierced through the glass. She always survives, she said softly. The words were barely audible. And this time, Hayes prompted. Madison's lips trembled. I just needed one thing to work, she said. There it was. Not a full confession, but not denial. You needed her to die, Ruiz said gently. Madison's eyes snapped up. No, she said quickly. I needed the pressure to stop. By eliminating her, Hayes replied. She shook her head rapidly. You're twisting it. Hayes slid Lily's statement summary onto the table. Madison stared at it. She's a child, she whispered. She heard you say insurance clears fast, Ruiz said. She misheard. She heard you say once Riley's gone, Hayes continued. Madison's composure cracked. She wasn't supposed to be part of this, she said. The room went silent. Ruiz leaned forward slightly. Part of what? She asked softly. Madison froze. The realization hit her face too late. Part of this. Hayes's voice stayed level. Part of the plan? Madison's breathing quickened. I didn't mean... You didn't mean for Ethan to drink it, Ruiz said. Madison closed her eyes briefly. That wasn't supposed to happen, she whispered. There it was, the pivot. You meant for Riley to drink it, Hayes said. Madison's shoulders slumped just slightly. I thought it would be quick, she said. Silence swallowed the room. You thought what would be quick? Ruiz asked. Madison opened her eyes. For once, she said bitterly, I thought it would be fair. Fair. You researched dosage, Hayes said. Madison's lips parted. You planned around her blood pressure, Ruiz added. I didn't want her to suffer, Madison said. The words were chilling. You wanted her to die cleanly, Hayes said. Madison didn't answer. She stared at the table. You forged the will, Hayes continued. You positioned yourself as sole beneficiary. She had everything, Madison whispered. And that justified murder? Ruiz asked quietly. Madison's head snapped up. I didn't think they'd look that closely, she said. The room stilled. You assumed grief would shield you, Hayes said. She swallowed. Yes. The word was barely audible. Hayes glanced at Ruiz. Ruiz nodded slightly. You understand this constitutes admission of premeditated intent, Hayes said calmly. Madison's eyes widened. I didn't... You acknowledged planning, Ruiz said. Research, timing, outcome. Madison's face drained of color. I didn't want it to look like murder, she whispered. There it was. Full, clear, documented. Behind the glass, I exhaled slowly. Not relief, not triumph. Finality. Madison slumped back in her chair. They never choose me, she said hollowly. Hayes's voice stayed steady. You chose this. She laughed once, bitter and small. I chose to stop being second. Ruiz leaned back. And now? She asked quietly. Madison stared at the table. Now there was no narrative left to control, no rehearsal, no performance. Just record. The door opened. An officer stepped in. Counsel has arrived, he said. Madison nodded slowly. As she stood, she looked toward the mirror again. This time I stepped back. I didn't need her to see me. She was led out of the room without another word. Hayes and Ruiz exited moments later. Hayes entered the observation room where I stood. You heard it, he said. Yes. She acknowledged planning, intent, and concealment, Ruiz added. Yes. Are you all right? Hayes asked. I thought about the kitchen floor, about Lily's small voice in the cafe, about the SUV outside my house. Yes, I said finally. They nodded. This moves forward to federal prosecution, Hayes said. It should, I replied. As I walked out of the building into the cold night air, snow had stopped. The sky was clear, sharp. For the first time since the funeral, the noise inside my head quieted. Not because the betrayal hurt less, but because it was no longer hidden. Madison had always believed she could rewrite the narrative, that if she controlled timing and emotion, she controlled outcome. Tonight the outcome was recorded, not whispered, not implied, recorded. And this time, survival wasn't luck, it was documented truth. The courtroom felt smaller than the interrogation room. Wood-paneled walls, the faint scent of old paper and polished benches. A federal seal mounted behind the judge's chair, everything orderly, structured, final. Madison sat at the defense table in a navy blazer that looked too formal for someone facing first-degree attempted murder charges. Her wrists were uncuffed now, her posture was straight, composed. I sat behind the prosecution team, hands folded in my lap, listening to the quiet murmur of spectators settling into place. Ethan was beside me. He still moved carefully, slower than usual, but he insisted on being there. I'm fine, he'd said that morning. I'm not missing this. The judge entered. Everyone stood. Proceedings began without theatrics. Charges were read formally: attempted murder in the first degree, inheritance fraud, identity theft, criminal conspiracy tied to organized gambling operations. Madison didn't look at me when the charges were spoken. Her attorney rose. "We enter a plea of not guilty at this time," he said calmly. Of course. Plea bargains were leverage. Truth was strategy. The prosecutor stood next. "We intend to demonstrate premeditation over a 2-month period," she said. "We will present evidence of poison acquisition, prescription tampering, forged legal documents, and recorded admissions." Recorded admissions. Madison's fingers tightened briefly on the edge of the table. The judge scheduled trial dates, pre-trial motions, evidence hearings. The machinery of justice moved steadily, unemotional. After the session adjourned, Madison was escorted toward the holding area. She glanced up once. Our eyes met. There was no apology in her expression, no regret, only calculation. "You didn't have to do this," she said quietly as officers paused beside her. I stepped closer, ignoring the warning look from one of the marshals. "You did," I replied. She shook her head faintly. "You could have walked away." "From what?" I asked. "From making this public. You made it public the moment you poisoned my kitchen." Her jaw tightened. "They won't understand," she said. "They already do." She was led away before she could respond. The hallway outside the courtroom buzzed with low conversation. Reporters lingered near the exit doors, microphones visible, cameras discreet but ready. "Ms. Thompson," one called gently as I stepped into the corridor. "Do you have a statement?" I didn't slow down. "No." "Do you believe justice is being served?" another asked. I stopped for half a second. "I believe accountability matters," I said simply. Then I kept walking. Outside, the winter air was sharp and clean. Snow from the previous night clung to the edges of the courthouse steps. Ethan exhaled slowly beside me. "She didn't look scared," he said. "She's not," I replied. "Should she be?" "Not yet." He studied my face. "You're steady," he observed. "I've had practice." We drove back toward Eugene in silence. The highway stretched gray and open ahead of us. My phone buzzed. Larson. "She'll likely seek a plea deal once her attorney reviews the full evidence," he said. "Will you recommend it?" I asked. "That depends." "On what?" "Whether she cooperates further against the betting network." I looked out at the passing trees. "She won't," I said. "Why are you sure?" "Because she still believes she's justified." Larson was silent for a moment. "You're probably right," he said. After we ended the call, Ethan reached for my hand. "You okay?" he asked. "Yes." It was true. The anger that had burned hot in the first days after the hospital had cooled into something steadier, controlled, focused. When we pulled into the driveway of my father's house, I noticed fresh tire tracks in the snow near the curb, different from the patrol car earlier. Wider, heavier vehicle. I slowed. "You see that?" Ethan asked quietly. "Yes." We didn't get out immediately. Instead, I scanned the street. Quiet. No visible cars idling. No headlights. The house looked undisturbed. Still. I parked but didn't turn off the engine right away. "You want me to call someone?" Ethan asked. "No." I stepped out and walked toward the front door. The reinforced deadbolt remained intact. No scratches, no forced entry. But the mailbox hung slightly open. I opened it carefully. Inside was a plain white envelope. No postage, no address. Just my name written in block letters. I brought it inside and locked the door behind us. Ethan watched from the kitchen as I opened it. Inside was a single photograph. Me, standing outside the Federal Building earlier that day. Taken from across the street, close enough to see my face clearly. On the back, one sentence: "You're still collateral." The paper felt cold in my hand. Ethan stepped closer. "Is that from them?" he asked. "Yes." "Madison's in custody," he said. "This isn't Madison," I replied. He understood immediately. Victor's network, pressure, retaliation. I picked up my phone and dialed Hayes. "Something's escalating," I said when he answered. I described the photograph. "Do not leave the house," he said immediately. "We're sending a unit." "They're trying to intimidate me," I said. "Yes," he replied, "which means the prosecution is hitting the right nerve." I hung up and placed the photo on the table. Ethan stared at it. "They won't stop, will they?" he asked. "They will," I said calmly, "when it becomes too expensive not to." He studied my face again. "You're not afraid," he said. "I am," I replied honestly. He blinked. "But fear doesn't decide," I added. Snow began falling again outside the window. Soft. Quiet. I walked into the study and placed the photograph beside the forged will. 2 attempts to control outcome. 2 failures. My father's framed photo sat on the desk, his eyes steady even in still image. "If either of you ever try to destroy the other over money, you've already lost," his words echoed. Madison had lost long before the courtroom, before the vodka, before the forged email. She had lost when fairness became entitlement, when entitlement became justification. A knock sounded at the door. Federal agents. They photographed the envelope, collected fingerprints, installed temporary surveillance across the street. "We'll increase patrol frequency," Hayes said quietly. "This is intimidation, not execution," he added. "They're testing reaction." "They won't get panic," I replied. He nodded. "That's good," he said, "because they expect it." After they left, the house felt heavy again, not with fear, with awareness. I sat at the kitchen table where Ethan had collapsed weeks earlier. The tile still looked new where it had been replaced. I ran my fingers along the grout line. "This is bigger than family," Ethan said quietly. "Yes." "But it started there." "Yes?" He exhaled slowly. "You could have ignored it," he said. "I couldn't," I replied, "because ignoring it would have meant accepting it, and acceptance would have meant teaching Lily something dangerous. That betrayal is survivable only if you stay silent." The snow outside thickened. The streetlights flickered on. I picked up the photograph again. "You're still collateral. They were wrong. Collateral implies expendable, replaceable, negotiable. I wasn't any of those." I walked to the window and looked out at the falling snow. The quiet didn't mean peace. Not yet. The trial would come. More evidence, more pressure, more attempts to rattle me. But tonight, the house was secure. The locks were reinforced. The truth was documented. Madison's confession recorded. The network exposed. The intimidation acknowledged. They thought survival was accidental. It wasn't. It was choice. And as I turned off the lights one by one, I understood something clearly. The battlefield had shifted. It wasn't just about proving Madison guilty anymore. It was about dismantling everything that believed my life was a negotiable asset. And I had no intention of walking away. The first morning of trial felt colder than the day of my father's funeral. Not because of the weather, because there was no illusion left. Snow had hardened into thin sheets of ice along the courthouse steps. Reporters lined the sidewalk this time, not subtle anymore. Camera lenses followed every movement as Ethan and I stepped out of the car. "Ms. Thompson, do you believe your sister intended to kill you?" someone called. I didn't answer. Inside, the federal courtroom buzzed with low conversation. Jurors filed in one by one, eyes careful, expressions neutral. Madison entered last. No cuffs, no visible panic. She wore a gray suit today, hair pulled back tightly. Controlled. Strategic. She didn't look at me. The judge took the bench. The prosecutor stood first for opening statements. "This is not a case of impulsive violence," she began. "This is a calculated plan executed over 2 months. The defendant researched lethal plant toxins. She altered legal documents to secure inheritance. She tampered with medication. She attempted to stage a death to appear natural." The words were steady, measured. The jury watched. "She believed grief would shield her," the prosecutor continued. She believed family would cloud suspicion. She was wrong. Madison's attorney rose next. "This is a tragedy fueled by misunderstanding," he said calmly. "Financial stress does not equal murder. Research does not equal action. We ask you to consider reasonable doubt." Reasonable doubt. I had lived in doubt for weeks. Now it had a courtroom. The prosecution called its first witness, Dr. Karen Holloway. She walked to the stand with quiet composure. "Dr. Holloway," the prosecutor began, "did you examine the defendant's sister's prescription medication?" "Yes," she replied. "What did you find?" "The medication had been replaced with a stronger hypotensive agent not prescribed to Ms. Thompson." "And the effect, if combined with alcohol?" "It could result in severe hypotension, cardiac arrhythmia, or death." The courtroom was silent. "Was this substitution accidental?" "No." Madison's attorney stood. "Doctor, is it possible a pharmacy error occurred?" Dr. Holloway held steady. "No. The imprint codes did not match the prescription. This was deliberate substitution." Next came the pharmacy manager. Surveillance footage played on a monitor. Madison visible near the prescription counter, lingering, waiting. Her attorney objected. "Being present is not tampering," he argued. The judge allowed the footage. The jury watched carefully. I watched Madison's face, still controlled, still steady. Victor Russo was called next. He walked into the courtroom in a dark suit that didn't hide the sharpness in his eyes. He took the oath without hesitation. "State your relationship to the defendant," the prosecutor asked. "I facilitated sports betting transactions," he replied. "Did the defendant owe money to your organization?" "Yes." "How much?" "Approximately $400,000. Murmurs rippled through the gallery. "Did she discuss her sister's inheritance?" "Yes." "Did she pledge a life insurance payout as collateral?" "Yes." Madison's attorney rose sharply. "This witness is a criminal seeking leniency." Victor didn't look rattled. "I am cooperating," he said calmly. "Did she describe a plan?" the prosecutor asked. "Yes." "What did it involve?" "Poisoning vodka, swapping medication, altering legal documents to ensure asset transfer." The courtroom held its breath. "Did she express intent for her sister to die?" the prosecutor asked. Victor didn't hesitate. "Yes." Madison's attorney stepped forward. "You expect this jury to believe you over a grieving sister?" he said sharply. Victor met his gaze. "I expect them to believe evidence." The prosecutor then played the audio recording from my father's study. Madison's voice filled the room. "You weren't supposed to survive." The words landed like a hammer. I kept my eyes forward. Madison's face remained composed, but her fingers curled tightly around the edge of the table. She always survives everything. This time she wasn't supposed to. Her voice echoed again. The jury shifted in their seats. The prosecution called Lily's father next. He described Madison's erratic behavior. Late-night phone calls, financial panic, statements about becoming rich before Christmas. The defense tried to frame it as stress, overwhelm, misinterpreted frustration. But the layers were too structured, too aligned. The prosecutor concluded the day with the enhanced security footage from Harold Whitaker's office. 2:23 in the morning. Madison entering the building, 8 minutes inside, the forged will displayed beside the original. The jurors leaned forward. The defense objected again. Speculation, circumstantial. The judge overruled. When court recessed for the day, I felt something shift, not relief, momentum. Madison was escorted out without speaking. Outside, the air felt sharper. Reporters waited again. "Ms. Thompson, do you feel vindicated?" "No," I said quietly. Vindication implied satisfaction. This was not that. Ethan walked beside me slowly. "You held steady," he said. "So did you," I replied. He squeezed my hand lightly. At home, the surveillance vehicle still sat discreetly across the street. Federal presence visible now. Less shadow, more deterrent. I stepped inside and closed the door behind us. The house felt quieter tonight, less invaded, more grounded. I walked into the study and sat in my father's chair. The trial wasn't over. More witnesses would come: forensics, digital analysts, financial experts. But the foundation was laid. Madison had believed grief would obscure logic. She had believed family loyalty would blur lines. Instead, the lines were sharp, clear, documented. My phone buzzed. A message from Hayes. "Strong day," I typed back. "She'll try to spin tomorrow." "Likely," he replied. I set the phone down and looked at the envelope labeled "Open if trust is broken." Trust had broken long ago. This wasn't about winning. It wasn't about revenge. It was about stopping something before it became generational. Lily would testify soon. That weighed heavier than any courtroom exchange, an 11-year-old carrying adult consequences. I closed my eyes briefly. The snow outside began again, quiet and steady. War zones taught me something simple. Momentum matters, day by day, evidence by evidence. Truth layered carefully until denial collapses under its own weight. Madison still believed she was misunderstood. But misunderstanding doesn't research poison. Misunderstanding doesn't forge signatures at 2:23 in the morning. Misunderstanding doesn't pledge a sister's death as collateral. Tomorrow, more pieces would fall into place. Tonight, the house remained secure. The trial had begun. And for the first time since that glass shattered on my kitchen floor, the truth was no longer hidden in whispers. It was spoken aloud, under oath, in record. And that changed everything. The second week of trial began with forensic evidence, cold, precise, unemotional. A toxicologist took the stand first, a woman in her early 50s with steady hands and a voice that never wavered. "We identified aconitine in the vodka bottle recovered from Ms. Thompson's residence," she said. "How certain are you?" the prosecutor asked. "Beyond scientific doubt." "And the concentration?" "High enough to induce fatal arrhythmia in a healthy adult, higher risk in individuals with underlying cardiovascular conditions." My name wasn't spoken, but the implication hung in the air. The prosecutor stepped closer. "Would symptoms present quickly?" "Yes, within 30 to 60 minutes. The jury shifted slightly. "That aligns with the timeline of Mr. Miller's collapse?" she continued. "Yes." The defense attorney rose slowly. "Doctor, aconitine is a plant-based compound, correct?" "Yes." "Is it commonly found in over-the-counter products?" "No." "Could accidental contamination occur?" "Not at this concentration." The defense paused. "Is it possible someone other than the defendant introduced the toxin?" The toxicologist didn't blink. "Possible in theory, but we found no evidence of external tampering beyond the bottle's reseal marks." "Reseal marks," the phrase echoed sharply. Next, the prosecution called a digital forensic analyst. He projected screen captures onto a large monitor. Search history, dosage thresholds, cardiac mimicry, symptoms resembling natural heart failure. The timestamps were clear. 2 months before the funeral. Multiple sessions. The analyst zoomed in on a specific search term. "How to mask poison as heart attack." A quiet ripple moved through the gallery. "Whose device?" the prosecutor asked. "Registered to Madison Thompson." The defense stood immediately. "Is it possible someone else used her laptop?" "Yes," the analyst admitted. "Is there evidence someone else did?" "No." The analyst clicked again. Login records from Whitaker's office server. IP address traced to Madison's apartment in Seattle. 2 separate entries. Late night, 2:23 in the morning. Duration, 8 minutes. The forged will appeared side by side with the original. The jury leaned forward. "Can you confirm file alteration?" the prosecutor asked. "Yes." "Was the metadata altered to conceal authorship?" "Yes." "Successfully?" "No." The defense tried again. "Is IP tracing 100% accurate?" "It is highly reliable within narrow geographic margins." "Meaning?" "Meaning the login originated from that apartment." Madison stared at the table, still composed, but quieter now. The prosecution rested its forensic portion and called Ethan. My chest tightened as he stood slowly and walked to the witness stand. He moved carefully, still not fully recovered. "State your name," the prosecutor said. "Ethan Miller." "Do you recall the evening of your collapse?" "Yes." "What did you consume?" "Vodka, from a bottle Madison gave Riley." "Who opened it?" "I did." "Why?" "I poured a glass before Riley could." "And what happened next?" "About 40 minutes later, my heart started racing. I felt dizzy. Then I collapsed." "Did you notice anything about Madison's behavior?" Ethan glanced toward the defense table. "She was watching Riley," he said. "Watching how?" "Like she was waiting." "For what?" "For Riley to drink first." The courtroom felt tight. The defense attorney stood. "Mr. Miller, you were under stress. Is it possible your perception was distorted?" "No." "Is it possible you misinterpreted concern as something else?" "No." "Do you dislike the defendant?" Ethan didn't hesitate. "I don't dislike her," he said, "but she tried to kill the woman I love." Silence. The defense shifted tone. "Is it true you and Riley discussed inheritance concerns before the funeral?" "Yes." "Did you stand to benefit financially from her father's estate?" "Yes." The implication hung. "But not from her death," Ethan added calmly. The defense fell quiet. After Ethan stepped down, the prosecution called Dr. Holloway again to clarify the medication swap. Photographs of the pill bottles were displayed. Imprint codes enlarged. Original prescription versus substituted drug. "Would combining this substituted medication with alcohol increase risk?" the prosecutor asked. "Yes," Dr. Holloway replied. "Dramatically." "And the defendant was aware of Miss Thompson's condition?" "Yes." The defense objected to speculation, sustained, but the jury had heard enough. Mid-afternoon, the prosecution played the audio recording again. Madison's voice. "I thought it would be quick. I didn't want her to suffer. You weren't supposed to survive." Her words filled the courtroom, heavier now after the forensic foundation. The defense approached the bench. Whispered exchange. Then cross-examination began. "Ms. Thompson was emotionally overwhelmed," the defense argued to the jury. "These statements reflect frustration, not intent." They replayed a smaller segment of the recording. "You always survive everything." They tried to frame it as sibling rivalry, resentment, emotional venting, but then the prosecutor replayed the full admission. "I didn't think they'd look that closely." The room fell silent again. When court recessed, I remained seated for a moment. The weight of the day pressed in. Ethan touched my shoulder lightly. "You okay?" he asked. "Yes." It wasn't numbness. It was clarity. Outside the courthouse, reporters pushed closer. "Ms. Thompson, do you believe the evidence is overwhelming?" I didn't answer. I walked past them without stopping. In the car, Ethan exhaled slowly. "She can't talk her way out of this," he said. "No," I replied. But I knew something else. Madison still believed she was justified. That belief made her unpredictable. Back home, I checked the perimeter automatically. The federal surveillance vehicle remained in position. No new tire tracks in the snow, no envelopes in the mailbox. Inside, the house felt steady. I sat in the study and opened my father's notebook. He had once written something in the margin of a page about finances. Money reveals character faster than crisis. He'd underlined reveals. The trial was revealing more than evidence. It was exposing entitlement, jealousy, calculation. I closed the notebook and leaned back in the chair. "Tomorrow," Lily would testify. The thought tightened something in my chest. An 11-year-old shouldn't have to define truth in a federal courtroom. But truth doesn't wait for age. My phone buzzed. A message from Hayes. "Defense strategy shifting toward diminished responsibility," I typed back. She knew exactly what she was doing. He replied, "That's what we're proving." I set the phone down. Snow continued falling outside, steady and quiet, layer upon layer. Like the evidence, layer upon layer. The first week of trial had built structure. The second week was sealing it. Madison had believed in timing, believed that grief would blur scrutiny, believed that family loyalty would override logic. But evidence doesn't grieve. It doesn't hesitate. It doesn't forget. As I turned off the lights and prepared for bed, I understood something clearly. The trial wasn't just about proving poison. It was about dismantling the narrative she built around fairness. Fairness doesn't involve aconitine. Fairness doesn't involve forged wills. Fairness doesn't involve rehearsed cover stories whispered to a child. Tomorrow would be harder, because tomorrow wouldn't involve lab reports. It would involve Lily. And children don't rehearse as well as adults. They tell the truth, even when it hurts. Lily wore a pale blue sweater 2 sizes too big for her. Her feet barely touched the floor when she sat in the witness chair. The judge had allowed her to testify from a smaller side room connected by closed-circuit video to reduce stress. A child advocate sat beside her, hands folded calmly in her lap. On the monitor in the courtroom, Lily's face appeared magnified and fragile at the same time. Madison stared at the screen without blinking. The prosecutor's voice softened. "Lily, can you tell us how old you are?" 11, she replied quietly. "And do you understand the difference between telling the truth and telling a lie?" "Yes." "What happens when someone lies?" "They get in trouble," she said simply. The prosecutor nodded gently. "Did you ever hear your mom talk about your Aunt Riley?" Lily's fingers twisted the hem of her sweater. "Yes." "What did she say?" Silence stretched for a second. "She said insurance clears fast," Lily said. The courtroom went still. "Did she say anything else?" the prosecutor asked. "She said once Aunt Riley's gone, probate clears faster." The word probate sounded strange coming from an 11-year-old. "Did she say that more than once?" the prosecutor asked. "Yes." "Who was she talking to?" "A man named Vic." Madison's attorney rose. "Objection, hearsay." The judge considered briefly. "Overruled for the purpose of establishing state of mind." The prosecutor continued. "Did your mom ever talk about the vodka?" Lily swallowed. "She said it would work." "What would work?" "The plan." The air felt tight in my lungs. "What plan?" the prosecutor asked gently. Lily hesitated. "She said if Aunt Riley died, everything would belong to us," she whispered. Madison's attorney stood again. "Objection." The judge allowed the answer. "Did your mom tell you to say anything if someone asked about the vodka?" the prosecutor asked. "Yes." "What did she tell you?" "She said to say I didn't see anything." The room was silent, except for the faint hum of the ventilation system. "Did you see anything?" the prosecutor asked. "Yes." "What did you see?" "I saw her holding the bottle in the kitchen before she gave it to Aunt Riley." Madison's jaw tightened. "Did she open it?" the prosecutor asked. "I don't know," Lily replied, "but she had it out of the bag." The prosecutor nodded. "Did your mom ever talk about Aunt Riley's medicine?" Lily nodded slowly. "She said alcohol would make it worse." The prosecutor paused. "Did she say what would happen?" "She said it would look natural." The words landed harder than anything else that morning. The defense attorney approached the podium slowly. "Lily," he began softly, "do you love your mom?" "Yes." "Very much?" "Yes." "Do you want her to get in trouble?" Lily's eyes filled slightly. "No." "Is it possible you misunderstood what she was saying?" he asked gently. Lily shook her head. "She practiced what to say," Lily said quietly. "Practiced?" he repeated. "Yes. She said if police asked, I should say we didn't see Aunt Riley much." The defense paused. "You've been talking to Aunt Riley a lot lately, haven't you?" he asked carefully. "Yes." "And she's upset with your mom?" "Yes." "Could it be that you're trying to protect your aunt?" Lily's small hands clenched. "I'm telling the truth," she said. The defense softened his tone. "Do you remember the exact words your mom used?" "Yes." What were they? Lily took a breath. She said she always survives everything. This time she won't. The courtroom felt like it exhaled all at once. The defense attorney stepped back. No further questions. On the monitor, Lily looked smaller somehow. The prosecutor thanked her gently. The screen went dark. Madison didn't move. Her face remained expressionless. But her eyes were different now, not disbelief, exposure. After Lily's testimony, the prosecution called a forensic accountant. Charts filled the screen. Gambling transactions, interest accumulation, payment deadlines. Was there urgency? The prosecutor asked. Yes, the accountant replied. Significant financial pressure. Did that pressure increase in the month before the funeral? Yes. The defense tried to frame it as desperation, emotional strain. But desperation paired with poison becomes intent. When court recessed, I remained seated for a moment longer than usual. Ethan squeezed my hand. She was brave, he said quietly. Yes. Outside, the sky had cleared. The air felt thinner. Reporters asked fewer questions today. They had their headline. Child testifies against mother in poisoning trial. I hated that sentence. Back home, I sat in the study and stared at the snow-covered yard. Lily's voice echoed in my head. She said it would look natural. She practiced what to say. She always survives everything. This time she won't. Children don't fabricate legal language. They repeat what they hear. My phone buzzed. Hayes. That was powerful, I typed back. She shouldn't have had to do it. He replied. But she did. I set the phone down. The house felt heavier tonight. Not from fear, from consequence. Madison had involved her child in rehearsed deception. That fact hurt more than the poison. I walked into the kitchen and ran my fingers along the counter. The tile had been replaced where Ethan collapsed, a visible seam in the flooring. Scars remain even after repair. Later that evening, I received a notification. The defense was filing a motion to suppress Lily's testimony, claiming coaching, manipulation. Predictable, I wasn't surprised. Madison would attempt to protect herself even if it meant discrediting her own daughter. Snow began falling again, quiet and steady, layer upon layer, like truth, layer upon layer. Tomorrow, the prosecution would play the full recording again. Frame it beside the forensic data, seal it tight. Madison had believed children were liabilities. Instead, Lily became clarity. As I turned off the lights and headed upstairs, I paused at the hallway photo of Madison and me as kids. We were standing in snow, arms linked, smiling. No resentment visible, no entitlement. Just two sisters surviving loss together. I touched the edge of the frame lightly. Somewhere along the way, survival became competition. Competition became resentment. Resentment became calculation. Calculation became poison. And now, it was evidence. Lily had told the truth, not because she wanted to hurt her mother, but because she understood something instinctively. Truth stops damage. Silence lets it grow. As I lay in bed that night, the quiet outside felt different, less tense, more settled. The trial was nearing its final turn. The layers were complete. Madison could deny. She could rationalize. She could claim misunderstanding. But she couldn't erase the recording. She couldn't erase the digital trail. And she couldn't erase her daughter's voice repeating what she had said in the dark. The jury had heard it. Under oath, without drama, without embellishment, just fact. And sometimes, fact is louder than fury. The defense began its case with a psychologist. He adjusted his glasses, smoothed the front of his suit jacket, and spoke in careful, measured tones. Madison Thompson was under extraordinary financial and emotional distress, he said. Chronic stress can impair judgment. The defense attorney nodded encouragingly. Can financial desperation cause someone to research extreme scenarios without intent to act? He asked. Yes, the psychologist replied. Research does not equal execution. The jury listened. Is it possible she was fantasizing rather than planning? The attorney continued. Yes, individuals under pressure may explore catastrophic thinking patterns. Catastrophic thinking. The phrase sounded clinical, detached. The prosecutor rose slowly. Doctor, are you aware that aconitine was physically present in a vodka bottle at the defendant's sister's home? Yes. Are you aware that the defendant's fingerprints were found on the substituted medication bottle? Yes. Are you aware of the recorded statement in which the defendant said, "You weren't supposed to survive"? The psychologist hesitated slightly. Yes. Is catastrophic thinking typically followed by poison acquisition and legal forgery? Silence. Not typically, he admitted. The prosecution stepped back. The defense shifted strategies. They called a character witness, an old friend of Madison's from Seattle. She's impulsive, the friend said, but she's not violent. The prosecutor approached. Were you aware of her gambling debt? No. Were you aware she pledged her sister's life insurance as collateral? The friend's expression faltered. No. No further questions. Next, Madison's attorney did something I hadn't expected. He called Madison herself. A ripple moved through the courtroom. She walked to the stand without hesitation, swore the oath, sat straight, calm, controlled. Madison, her attorney began gently, did you intend to kill your sister? No, her voice was clear. Did you put poison in that bottle? No. Did you switch her medication? No. Did you forge the will? I sent an email, she replied. But I believed I had authority. The prosecutor stood for cross-examination. Authority to remove yourself as equal beneficiary? She asked. My father trusted me too, Madison said evenly. Did he? The prosecutor asked. Yes. Then why did you send the email at 2:23 in the morning? Silence. I couldn't sleep, Madison replied. And you couldn't wait for business hours? I was anxious. Anxious enough to impersonate your sister? Madison's jaw tightened. I thought it was temporary. Temporary removal of her inheritance? Yes. Why? Because she had everything, Madison snapped before catching herself. The courtroom stilled. Everything? The prosecutor repeated. Yes. She had responsibility, the prosecutor said. She had control, Madison shot back. The prosecutor approached the stand. Did you research aconitine? I research many things, Madison replied. Did you search how to mask poison as heart attack? Madison hesitated. I don't recall. The prosecutor displayed the search history, time-stamped, her user profile visible. Is that your device? She asked. Yes. Is that your account? Yes. And this search was made by you? Madison's composure flickered. I don't remember the context. The prosecutor didn't blink. Did you tell Victor Russo you had a 3-layer plan? No. The prosecutor played Victor's testimony excerpt. She proposed poison, medication swap, altered will. Madison's eyes narrowed. He's lying. The prosecutor pressed further. Did you tell your daughter insurance clears fast? I was discussing paperwork. Did you say once Riley's gone? I meant emotionally gone, Madison said quickly. A faint sound rippled through the gallery. Emotionally gone? The prosecutor repeated. Yes. You also said she always survives everything. This time she won't. What did you mean by that? Madison's hands clenched. I was angry. Angry enough to stage a death? No. Angry enough to pledge her life insurance as collateral? Silence. I didn't think she'd actually die, Madison said quietly. The words hung in the air. You didn't think she'd actually die? The prosecutor repeated. I thought it would scare her, Madison said. With poison? The prosecutor asked. I didn't know the dosage would be that strong. You researched dosage thresholds, the prosecutor replied. Madison's voice rose slightly. I was under pressure. From gambling debts? the prosecutor asked. Yes. $400,000? Yes. And you believed your sister's death would resolve that pressure? Silence. I believed the insurance would, Madison said finally. The courtroom went silent. The prosecutor stepped back. No further questions. Madison remained on the stand for a moment longer before stepping down. Her attorney tried to regain ground and redirect. Did you love your sister? He asked. Yes, Madison said immediately. Did you want her dead? No. But you admit you believed the insurance payout would resolve your debt? He asked carefully. Yes. And you admit you altered the will to secure that payout? Yes. And you admit you researched poison? Yes. The defense faltered. The redirect didn't recover what had already been exposed. When Madison stepped back to the defense table, she finally glanced at me. Not with disbelief this time, with something closer to resentment, as if this outcome was my fault. Court adjourned early that afternoon. Closing arguments were scheduled for the following day. Outside, the snow had stopped. The sky looked almost clear. Ethan walked beside me slowly. She tried to soften it, he said quietly. She tried to reshape it, I replied. But truth resists reshaping once it's recorded. At home, I stood in the kitchen for a long time. The counter looked ordinary again. No evidence bags, no technicians, just wood grain and quiet air. I thought about Madison's words. I didn't think she'd actually die. As if death were a variable, as if poison were a negotiation tool. My phone buzzed. Hayes. She admitted knowledge and intent indirectly. Jury saw it, I typed back. She still believes she's justified. He responded. That's not a defense. I set the phone down and walked into the study. The original will remain on the desk, untouched, unaltered. My father's signature steady across the bottom. I ran my fingers lightly over the ink. He had trusted both of us once. That was the part that hurt most. Not the money, not the property, the trust. As night settled in, I sat by the window watching snow melt slowly under the streetlights. Tomorrow would bring closing arguments, summaries, final framing, but the core had already been exposed. Madison had admitted altering the will, admitted believing insurance would resolve her debt, admitted researching poison. She hadn't cried. She hadn't apologized. She had rationalized. And rationalization is thinner than denial. Because once you justify, you admit. As I turned off the lights and headed upstairs, I understood something clearly. The jury didn't need drama. They didn't need revenge. They needed alignment. And the alignment was complete. Poison, medication swap, forged will, insurance pledge, recorded admission, child testimony, layered, structured, intentional. Tomorrow would not be about proving what happened. It would be about deciding consequence. And for the first time since the funeral, I felt something close to stillness. Not peace, not yet. But inevitability. The courtroom felt heavier on the day of closing arguments. Not louder, heavier. The evidence had been laid out piece by piece over 2 weeks, and now everything narrowed to interpretation. Madison sat perfectly still at the defense table. Gray suit again, hair pulled back, hands folded, composed. The prosecutor rose first. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't pace dramatically. She simply walked to the center of the courtroom and looked at the jury. This case is about premeditation, she began. Not impulse, not misunderstanding, not emotional exaggeration. She paused. For 2 months, the defendant researched lethal poison. She studied cardiac mimicry. She learned how to stage a death to look natural. A screen behind her displayed the search history. How to mask poison as heart attack. Dosage threshold aconitine. Symptoms resemble arrhythmia. These are not the searches of someone venting frustration, she continued. These are the searches of someone preparing. She stepped aside, and another image appeared. The forged will beside the original. 10 days before her father's stroke, she accessed her attorney's server at 2:23 in the morning. She impersonated her sister. She removed her as beneficiary. The prosecutor let that sink in. She created financial motive before she created medical opportunity. A faint murmur moved through the courtroom. She clicked the remote again. The vodka bottle. Reseal marks visible. Forensic toxicology confirmed aconitine in that bottle. Not accidental, not environmental. Introduced. Then the medication photos appeared, imprint codes, swapped tablets. She replaced her sister's prescribed medication with a stronger hypotensive agent. She faced the jury directly. She layered her plan. Her voice remained steady. Poison in the vodka, medication to amplify vulnerability, forged will to secure inheritance, insurance pledged as collateral to resolve a $400,000 gambling debt. The number hung in the air. She believed grief would protect her. She believed timing would shield her. She believed no one would look closely. The prosecutor turned toward Madison briefly. She miscalculated. Then she played the recording one final time. Madison's voice filled the courtroom. You weren't supposed to survive. I didn't want her to suffer. I didn't think they'd look that closely. The room felt airtight. Intent, the prosecutor said quietly. Knowledge, planning, admission. She stepped back. This is not a tragedy of misunderstanding. This is attempted murder with calculated concealment. She returned to her seat. The defense attorney stood slowly. He adjusted his tie. He looked at the jury with a softer expression. This case is about desperation, he began, about financial ruin, about sibling rivalry amplified by grief. He gestured toward Madison. She made mistakes. She altered documents. She researched extreme topics online. But research is not action. He walked toward the jury box. She did not physically administer poison. There is no direct eyewitness testimony of her opening that bottle. He paused. She admitted financial stress. She admitted poor judgment. But she denied intent to kill. He softened his tone further. She said she didn't think her sister would actually die. A few jurors shifted slightly. That is not premeditated murder, he said. That is catastrophic thinking under pressure. He looked back at Madison. She loved her sister. She panicked. She made reckless decisions. But reckless is not the same as murderous. He returned to his table. The judge gave instructions to the jury. Burden of proof, reasonable doubt, elements of attempted murder. The jury filed out to deliberate. The courtroom emptied slowly. Madison remained seated, staring straight ahead. Her attorney leaned in and whispered something. She nodded once. I stood and walked toward the exit. As I passed her table, she finally spoke. You look confident, she said quietly. I look finished, I replied. She tilted her head slightly. You could still tell them you forgive me, she said. I stopped. This isn't about forgiveness, I said. It could be, she insisted. You tried to kill me, I said calmly. She inhaled slowly. I was drowning, she whispered. You chose poison. She looked away. They'll never understand what it feels like to always be second, she muttered. I didn't answer, because understanding resentment doesn't justify murder. Outside, the winter air felt sharp and clear. Ethan walked beside me. Whatever happens, he said quietly, you did everything right. I didn't want this, I replied. I know. We drove home in silence. Snow had begun falling again, thin and steady. At the house, I walked straight into the study. The envelope labeled, "Open if trust is broken," sat on the desk. I opened it again. If either of you ever try to destroy the other over money, you've already lost. Lost. The word felt different now. Madison believed this trial determined winning and losing. But she had lost long before the courtroom. She had lost when she rehearsed lies to her daughter. She had lost when she researched poison in the dark. She had lost when she measured my life against her debt and decided it was negotiable. My phone buzzed. Hayes. Jury requested playback of recording. I typed back. That's decisive. Likely, he replied. The evening stretched long. Ethan rested on the couch while I stood by the window watching snow accumulate on the porch. My mind didn't race. It moved slowly, steadily, layer by layer, evidence, admission, intent. No single piece stood alone. Together they formed structure. Around 9:30, my phone rang again. Hayes. They've reached a verdict, he said. My pulse didn't spike. When? I asked. Tomorrow morning. I ended the call and stood still for a moment. Ethan looked up. It's done? He asked. Tomorrow. He nodded. I walked into the kitchen and ran my hand along the counter where the vodka had once stood. The tile seam still visible. A scar. Scars don't disappear. They integrate. That night I slept for the first time without waking to phantom sounds. No imagined footsteps. No imagined engines idling outside. Just snow tapping softly against the window. Morning arrived gray and quiet. The courthouse steps were cleared but slick. Reporters were already positioned. This time fewer questions, more anticipation. Inside, the courtroom filled quickly. The jury entered, faces unreadable. The foreperson stood when asked. Has the jury reached a verdict? Yes. The word hung heavy. My hands rested calmly in my lap. Madison sat rigidly. The judge nodded. Please read the verdict. The foreperson unfolded the paper slowly. In the matter of the United States versus Madison Thompson on the charge of attempted murder in the first degree. The pause stretched. I didn't look at Madison. I looked straight ahead and waited. In the matter of the United States versus Madison Thompson on the charge of attempted murder in the first degree, we find the defendant guilty. The word didn't echo. It landed. Heavy. Final. Madison didn't flinch immediately. Her face remained still, almost detached, as if the verdict applied to someone else. The foreperson continued. On the charge of inheritance fraud. Guilty. A faint breath escaped someone in the gallery. On the charge of identity theft. Guilty. The air felt tight. On the charge of criminal conspiracy. Guilty. Each word stacked on the last, layer upon layer, like the evidence had. The judge asked, Is this the unanimous verdict of the jury? Yes, the foreperson replied. Madison's composure cracked then, not dramatically, not theatrically, but in the smallest visible way. Her shoulders dipped half an inch, her fingers tightened around the edge of the defense table. No tears, no outburst, just a quiet collapse of control. I remained seated, still. Ethan's hand found mine and squeezed once. The judge thanked the jury for their service and scheduled sentencing for the following month. Court adjourned. Madison stood slowly as marshals approached. She looked at me for the first time since the verdict was spoken. You think this makes you safe? She asked quietly. I met her gaze. I think this makes the truth permanent, I replied. She shook her head faintly. You always survive everything, she whispered again. And you always choose the wrong battlefield, I said. She was led away without further resistance. Outside the courthouse, reporters surged forward. Ms. Thompson, do you feel justice has been served? Justice? Such a clean word for something so messy. I feel accountability has been delivered, I said calmly. And your sister? She made her choices. I didn't say more, because nothing else mattered. The sky above Portland was clear that afternoon. The snow had stopped. The air felt thin and cold. Ethan exhaled slowly beside me. It's over, he said. No, I replied quietly. It's concluded. There's a difference. Back home, the house felt different. Not lighter, not brighter. Different. The study didn't feel like a war room anymore. The kitchen didn't feel like a crime scene. They felt like rooms again. I stood in the doorway of my father's bedroom for a moment. The bed still neatly made, his sweater folded over the chair. Loss had been the beginning of this chain, not the motive. The catalyst. My phone buzzed. Hayes. Sentencing likely between 25 and 30 years given federal guidelines, I typed back. Understood, he added. She may address the court before sentencing. I set the phone down. I didn't know whether I wanted to hear that. The next weeks passed in a quiet rhythm. Physical therapy appointments for Ethan, paperwork finalization with Whitaker, insurance corrections, the forged will officially nullified, the original reinstated, the house legally secured. Federal agents continued investigating the betting network. Victor testified further in sealed proceedings. His cooperation earned him reduction. Madison refused any plea agreement. She insisted on appealing. She insisted she had been misunderstood. Lily visited once with her father. We baked cookies in the kitchen. She didn't ask about court. She didn't ask about prison. She asked if snow always falls this quietly here. Yes, I told her. She watched flakes gather on the porch railing. I don't want to be angry like Mom, she said softly. You don't have to be, I replied. The day of sentencing arrived under a gray sky. I chose not to attend in person. Ethan asked me twice if I was sure. I'm sure, I said. I didn't need to see her hear the number. I already knew the outcome. Hayes called mid-morning. 28 years, he said. I closed my eyes briefly. Federal custody. Any statement? I asked. Yes, I waited. She said she never meant for Ethan to get hurt, Hayes continued, and that she only wanted what was fair. Fair, the word again. Did she apologize? I asked. No. I nodded slowly, though he couldn't see it. Thank you, I said. When I ended the call, the house felt still, not triumphant, not relieved. Still. Ethan stood in the doorway. It's done, he said softly. Yes. I walked into the study and sat in my father's chair. The envelope labeled "Open if trust is broken" lay open on the desk. If either of you ever try to destroy the other over money, you've already lost. Madison had lost. But not to me, to herself, to entitlement, to resentment left unattended too long. Snow began falling again outside. First of the season's heavier storm. The yard turned white within minutes. I stood and walked to the window. The world looked untouched, clean. But I knew better. Snow covers. It doesn't erase. The war hadn't ended the day of the verdict. It ended the day I refused to stay silent. I thought back to the kitchen floor, to the shattered glass, to Ethan's pulse racing under my fingers, to Madison standing in the doorway asking if I had drunk any. She had built 3 layers of protection, poison, medication, forgery. She had calculated my vulnerability. She had misjudged my resilience. I turned away from the window and walked through the house slowly. Room by room, kitchen, living room, study, bedroom, each space carried memory, but none carried fear anymore. My phone buzzed once more. A news alert. Sister sentenced in elaborate funeral poisoning plot. I deleted it without opening. This wasn't a headline. It was a lesson. Blood does not guarantee loyalty. Money does not guarantee security. And jealousy, left to ferment, becomes something far more dangerous than debt. That night, I sat at the kitchen table with Ethan. We didn't talk much. We didn't need to. The silence felt earned. I don't feel victorious, he said after a while. Good, I replied. He looked at me. Why? Because this was never about winning. He nodded slowly. Outside, the snow continued falling, thick, steady, quiet. For the first time since the funeral, I slept without dreaming of sirens, without hearing the crack of glass, without replaying her voice. The next morning, the yard was completely white. No footprints, no tire tracks, just open space. I stepped onto the porch and let the cold air fill my lungs. The war in my family had not been fought with weapons. It had been fought with paperwork, poison, and perception. But the principle was the same. You confront what threatens your ground. You hold your position. You document truth. And you refuse to surrender to intimidation. Madison had believed survival was luck. She had believed she could engineer fate. She had believed fairness meant equal outcome. She was wrong. Survival is choice. Peace is choice. And ending a cycle is choice. I closed the door behind me and walked back into the house. The battlefield was no longer outside. It wasn't in a courtroom. It wasn't in a hospital hallway. It was inside the decision to move forward without bitterness, and that was the only victory that mattered. The snow didn't melt for 3 days. It stayed heavy on the roofline and along the fence, muting the world outside my father's house. Sentencing was over. The verdict was final. But closure is quieter than people think. It doesn't arrive with applause. It arrives in stillness. Ethan moved more easily now, his steps steadier across the kitchen tile that had once been slick with spilled vodka. Physical therapy had done its work. The tremor in his hands was gone. The arrhythmia had stabilized. "You keep checking the locks," he said one morning, watching me secure the back door again. "I know," I replied. "You don't have to anymore." I nodded, but habit lingers longer than threat. Federal agents had reduced their visible presence. The unmarked SUV across the street disappeared 2 days after sentencing. Hayes called once to confirm the betting network had been dismantled in multiple states. "Victor provided names we didn't expect," he said. "It's expanding." "Good," I replied. The intimidation had stopped. No more envelopes in the mailbox. No more blurred photos left at my door. Pressure disperses when accountability locks in. I sat in the study later that afternoon with my father's notebook open in front of me. He had always written in clean, narrow print. Short sentences, no wasted words. One page caught my attention again. Resentment compounds faster than interest. He had drawn a small line beneath it. I thought about Madison's face the day of sentencing. Not remorseful, not devastated, just stunned that her calculation had failed. Lily called that evening. "Mom won't be home for a long time," she said quietly. "No," I replied. "Dad says I can visit more if you want." "I'd like that." She hesitated. "Do you think she hates you?" she asked. I leaned back in the chair. "I think she hated what she thought I represented," I said carefully. "What's that?" Lily asked. "Control," I replied. "Responsibility." "She always said you were the favorite," Lily said. I closed my eyes briefly. "Being trusted isn't the same as being favored," I said. Lily was quiet for a moment. "I don't want to be angry," she said again. "You don't have to be," I replied. That night, after the call ended, I walked into the kitchen and ran my hand along the counter again. The tile seam had faded into the pattern, still visible if you knew where to look. Scars don't disappear. They integrate. Ethan came up behind me and wrapped his arms around my waist. "You're somewhere else," he said softly. "Just thinking," I replied. "About her?" "Yes." "Regret?" he asked. I considered the word carefully. "No," I said. "Anger?" "Less than before." He rested his chin lightly against my shoulder. "Then what?" "Understanding." He was quiet. "She didn't start with poison," I said slowly. "She started with comparison." "And that turned into entitlement," he said. "Yes." "And entitlement turned into justification." "Yes." He exhaled softly. "Money amplifies what's already there," he said. I nodded. Outside, the snow shifted slightly in the wind. The world didn't feel fragile anymore. It felt recalibrated. A week later, I visited the cemetery alone. My father's headstone was dusted with frost. I brushed it away gently with my glove. "I handled it," I said quietly, though no one was there to hear. Handled it. That phrase used to mean control. Now it meant clarity. Madison had believed I always survived everything. She had been right. But survival isn't luck. It's attention. It's pattern recognition. It's refusing to ignore the moment something feels wrong. I stood there longer than I intended. Not grieving the verdict, grieving the sister I once had. There is a difference between accountability and satisfaction. I felt the first, not the second. When I returned home, the house felt warm. Ethan was in the living room assembling a bookshelf he'd ordered. "You're rebuilding," I said lightly. He smiled faintly. "Feels appropriate." We worked in silence for a while. The sound of screws tightening into wood felt grounding, constructive. Later that evening, Hayes called again. "She filed an appeal," he said. "I expected that." "It won't change the conviction," he added. "I know." There was a pause. "You've been steady through all of this," he said. "Steady isn't the same as untouched," I replied. He understood. After the call, I walked to the window. The snow had begun to thin along the edges of the yard, patches of dark earth breaking through. Truth does that. It melts what was covering something else. A week later, Lily visited again. We baked cookies and burned the first batch because she insisted on turning the oven too high. She laughed, really laughed. The sound filled the kitchen in a way nothing else had. "Mom always said you don't need anyone," she said at one point. I paused. "That's not true," I replied. "Then why did she think you'd be fine without her?" I considered that carefully. "Because she believed independence meant isolation," I said. "Does it?" Lily asked. "No." She nodded slowly. As she left that evening with her father, she hugged me tightly. "I'm glad you didn't die," she whispered. I held her a second longer than usual. "So am I." After they drove away, I stood in the driveway watching the taillights fade. The air felt lighter now, not because the damage had disappeared, because it had been named. Accountability does that. It gives shape to harm, and once harm has shape, it can be contained. That night, Ethan and I sat by the fireplace. He looked at me thoughtfully. "Do you miss her?" he asked. I didn't answer immediately. "I miss who she was," I said finally, "not who she became." "No." He nodded. "Jealousy is quiet," he said, "until it isn't." Yes. Madison's resentment had fermented in silence. It hadn't exploded. It had calculated, layered, structured. That was the most dangerous part. She hadn't acted in rage. She had acted in strategy. The difference matters. As the weeks passed, life settled into routine. Work resumed. Physical therapy appointments ended. The betting network case moved forward in federal court, separate from Madison's. Victor would likely serve less time. Deals are currency in that world. I didn't dwell on it. My part was done. One evening, as I locked the back door, I realized something small but significant. I wasn't checking it twice anymore. I wasn't scanning the street before turning off the lights. I wasn't replaying the night Ethan collapsed. The body learned safety slowly. Mine had begun. I walked into the study and sat in my father's chair one last time before closing the notebook and placing it back in the safe. Resentment compounds faster than interest. He had known. Maybe not the specifics, but the principle. Jealousy unattended grows roots. Roots break foundations. The snow outside finally began to melt completely. The yard returned to brown earth. Ordinary, unremarkable. Peace doesn't look dramatic. It looks like unlocked shoulders. It looks like uninterrupted sleep. It looks like a house that feels like a home again. Madison would spend decades confined by walls she built herself. I would not. And that difference wasn't revenge. It was choice. The war in my family had ended not with shouting, not with collapse, but with documentation, with truth spoken under oath, with evidence layered until denial had nowhere left to stand. Survival is not winning. It is continuing, and continuing without bitterness. That is the real work. That is the real ending. And for the first time since the funeral, I felt ready to step forward without looking back. The first time I slept through the night without waking to phantom sirens, I almost didn't trust it. Morning light filtered through the curtains softly, pale and quiet, without the sharp jolt of adrenaline that had defined the weeks after Ethan collapsed. No racing heartbeat, no immediate mental inventory of locks and windows, just silence. Ethan was already awake, standing in the kitchen, pouring coffee. "You look different," he said when I walked in. "How?" "Like you're not waiting for something." I leaned against the counter. "I'm not," I said. The house felt settled now. Not tense, not braced. The reinforced locks were still there, but they felt like precautions, not barricades. Outside, the last of the snow had melted into dark patches of wet earth. Early spring light lingered longer in the evenings. The world kept moving forward whether we were ready or not. Madison had been transferred to a federal correctional facility 2 states away. Appeals filed, motions pending. But the verdict stood. 28 years, 28 winters she wouldn't see freely. I didn't feel satisfaction when I thought about that number. I felt distance. The case had moved from crisis to record, from fear to file, from threat to archive. That shift changes the air in a house. A week later, Lily visited again. She carried a sketchbook with her this time. "I drew something," she said, sitting at the kitchen table. She flipped it open. 2 houses in snow, one with smoke rising from the chimney, one dark. "Which one is which?" I asked gently. "This one's yours," she said, pointing to the lit one. "And the other?" She shrugged slightly. "Mom says prison is temporary," she said. "Prison is long," I replied carefully. "She says you overreacted." The words didn't sting anymore. "She can say that," I said. "But that doesn't change what happened." Lily nodded slowly. "I don't want to be like that," she said. "You're not," I replied. "Sometimes I feel mad at you," she admitted quietly. "For what?" "For telling," I didn't interrupt. "But I also feel mad at her," she continued, "for making it happen." "That's normal," I said. She traced a line across the paper with her finger. "Do you hate her?" she asked. The question lingered. "No," I said finally. "Hate keeps you connected in a way I don't want to be." She looked up at me. "What keeps you connected?" "History," I said. "Not emotion." She considered that for a moment, then nodded. We baked again that afternoon. No burnt cookies this time. The kitchen smelled warm and sweet instead of sterile and tense. Memory can be reclaimed. It just takes repetition. After Lily left, Ethan and I sat on the porch steps watching the sunset. "You've changed," he said quietly. "Everyone changes," I replied. "Not like this." I knew what he meant. The sharp vigilance that had defined my movements since the funeral had softened. Not disappeared, softened. "You can't live in battle stance forever," he added. "No," I agreed. I thought about the way Madison had described me in court. She always survives everything. She had meant it as resentment. But survival is not aggression. It's attention. It's restraint. It's refusing to let someone else's instability dictate your posture. The following week I received a letter. Return address, Federal Correctional Institution. I stared at it for a long moment before opening it. Madison's handwriting was unchanged. Sharp loops, confident strokes. "Riley, you always needed to be right. I hope you're happy now. You've destroyed everything. There was no apology, no accountability, just accusation. You could have chosen family over pride." I folded the letter carefully and placed it back in the envelope. Destroyed everything. The words didn't take root. She had destroyed something long before the courtroom. I didn't write back. There was nothing to clarify. That evening I walked through the house slowly. The study felt like a room again. Not a strategy hub. The kitchen felt like a place to cook. Not a crime scene. The bedroom felt like rest, not vigilance. I paused at the hallway photo of Madison and me as children. Snow piled high behind us, our faces flushed with cold. For a moment, I let myself feel the loss. Not the loss of money, not the loss of shared inheritance, the loss of a version of her that existed before comparison overtook connection. Grief is different from anger. It's quieter, softer. And it doesn't demand action, it demands acknowledgement. I touched the frame lightly and kept walking. The next morning, Hayes called again. "Appeal was formally filed," he said. "Expected," I replied. "It won't overturn the conviction. Evidence was layered." "I know," he paused. "You did the right thing." The phrase lingered. Right doesn't always feel good. It feels necessary. After the call, I drove to the cemetery again. The frost was gone this time. Green shoots were beginning to push through the soil around my father's headstone. Seasons don't pause for family drama. They cycle. "I ended it," I said quietly, not triumphantly, just factually. The wind moved lightly through the trees. No answer came. None was needed. When I returned home, Ethan was assembling a new dining table. "You're nesting," I teased. He smiled faintly. "Reclaiming," he corrected. "Yes, reclaiming." Later that afternoon, I sat at the kitchen table and opened a blank notebook. Not my father's. Mine. I wrote one sentence. "Blood does not guarantee loyalty." I paused, then wrote another. "Jealousy ignored becomes entitlement." And another. "Survival is not victory. It is opportunity." The words didn't feel like a lesson. They felt like clarity. Lily would grow up knowing what happened. She would have to decide how to carry it. But she would also know that silence is not protection. Silence is erosion. The sun set earlier that evening than I expected. Spring light shifting again. The house glowed softly from within. I stepped outside and locked the door once, not twice. Once it held. The street was quiet. No idling engines, no shadowed figures, no waiting, just ordinary night, ordinary air, ordinary peace. The war in my family had not ended with shouting. It had ended with documentation, with recorded words, with a jury's verdict. But the real ending had come later, when I stopped replaying it, when I stopped scanning for threat, when I allowed the house to feel like a home again. Madison believed fairness meant equal outcome. She never understood that fairness is rooted in accountability, not entitlement, and accountability is rarely comfortable. But it is clean. That night, as I turned off the last light and climbed the stairs, I realized something simple. I no longer carried her voice in my head. The echo had faded, the snow had melted, the battlefield had closed. And what remained was not revenge, not triumph, just space, space to move forward, space to breathe, space to choose something different. That is what survival becomes when it is no longer under attack. It becomes freedom. And freedom, once reclaimed, does not need to shout. It just exists. I didn't attend the sentencing hearing in person. I woke before sunrise that morning and stood in the kitchen barefoot, watching the sky turn from deep blue to gray over the trees behind the house. The air felt different than it had on the day of the verdict. Quieter, less charged. The coffee maker clicked off. Steam curled upward in thin ribbons. Ethan came in a few minutes later, pulling on a sweater. "You're sure?" he asked gently. "Yes," I said. He didn't push. There are moments when showing up feels like strength, and there are moments when not showing up feels like closure. This was the second kind. I sat at the same kitchen table where Ethan had collapsed months ago and opened my laptop. Hayes had told me the hearing would begin at 9 in the morning. He would call after. In the meantime, I had something else to finish. I pulled out a sheet of paper and began writing, not to the judge, not to the jury, to myself. "Madison, you chose calculation over conversation. You chose resentment over responsibility. You chose poison over honesty." I paused. The words felt steady, not angry, just factual. I continued, "You say I destroyed everything. But everything was already broken the moment you decided my life was collateral." I set the pen down and folded the paper once. I wasn't going to send it. Some letters are written for release, not delivery. At 9:27, my phone vibrated. Hayes. "It's done," he said. "How long?" I asked. 28 years, federal custody." "And her statement?" I asked. He paused briefly. She said she never meant for Ethan to get hurt. She said she only wanted what was fair. Fair, the word again. She did not apologize, he added. I didn't expect her to, I replied. She requested reconsideration for Lily's sake. Of course she did. Hayes hesitated. You don't sound surprised. I'm not. After we ended the call, I closed my eyes for a moment. 28 years. I tried to picture that length of time. Lily would be nearly 40. The house would be different. The world would be different. Madison would age behind concrete walls. Not because I wanted her there, but because she built a structure that left no other outcome. Ethan sat across from me. It's finished, he said quietly. Yes. He reached across the table and squeezed my hand. We didn't speak for a while. The silence wasn't heavy, it was complete. Later that afternoon, I drove to the cemetery alone. The grass had grown greener since my last visit. Small flowers dotted the edge of the path. I stood in front of my father's headstone and let the breeze move through my hair. She said she wanted what was fair, I murmured. The wind didn't respond. It didn't need to. Fairness doesn't erase intent. It doesn't rewrite evidence. It doesn't neutralize poison. I brushed my fingers across the engraved letters of his name. You warned us. Not in specifics, in principle, resentment compounds faster than interest. She let it compound. I chose to stop it. When I returned home, the mailbox contained another letter. Return address, the correctional facility. I held it for a moment before opening it. Riley, you've always needed to win. You think prison changes anything? I'll still be your sister. I read the sentence twice. No remorse, no ownership, just persistence. You could have walked away. You chose to ruin us. I folded the letter carefully and placed it beside the first one in a drawer. There was nothing to respond to. That evening, Lily called again. Dad told me the judge said a number, she said quietly. Yes, I replied. Is it forever? No, I said gently. But it's a long time. She was quiet for a moment. Mom said you forced this, she whispered. I didn't rush to answer. What do you think? I asked. She hesitated. I think she did something bad, she said slowly. And bad things have consequences. I closed my eyes briefly. That's right, I said. She exhaled softly. I don't want to hate her, she added. You don't have to, I replied. You can love someone and still know they were wrong. She was quiet again. Can I still come over next weekend? She asked. Yes, I said. Okay. After the call ended, I stood in the kitchen and let the silence settle. The house no longer felt like a place waiting for impact. It felt inhabited, stable. I walked into the study and opened the safe. Inside lay the original will, my father's notebook, and the 2 letters from Madison. I added the unsent letter I had written that morning, not as a threat, not as a message, as a marker. The chapter was closed, not erased, closed. Ethan stepped into the doorway. You look lighter, he said. I feel finished, I replied. He smiled faintly. Finished isn't the same as healed, he said. No, I agreed, but it's a start. We sat on the couch later that night, watching snow begin to fall again outside the window. Not heavy, just enough to dust the yard. I keep thinking about the moment she handed you that bottle, he said quietly. So do I. What did you feel? Instinct, I replied. He looked at me. I felt something was wrong, I said, but I didn't know what. And now, he asked, now I know to trust that feeling. He nodded slowly. That's what this changed most. Not my faith in systems, not my belief in law, my faith in instinct. The subtle shift in air, the slight overemphasis on whether I had drunk from the bottle, the way she watched, those moments matter. I turned off the television and sat in the dim light for a while. The snow outside settled quietly on the porch railing. Peace isn't loud. It's subtle. It's not fireworks or celebration. It's not headlines or applause. It's the absence of tension in your shoulders. It's locking the door once and trusting it. It's sleeping without rehearsing worst-case scenarios. The next morning I woke without checking my phone immediately. That was new. I made coffee, opened the curtains, let sunlight spill into the kitchen. Madison would spend decades replaying her choices. I would not. Her resentment had shaped her outcome. My boundaries had shaped mine. Later that day, I drove past the courthouse without slowing. It looked ordinary. Just another building in the city. The drama it held weeks ago had dissolved into routine. Trials end, records remain. But life moves. As I turned onto the road back home, I understood something clearly. Survival is not victory. It is the opportunity to stop a cycle, and cycles only stop when someone refuses to play their part. Madison played hers. I refused mine, and that refusal changed everything. The war in my family did not end with shouting. It ended with documentation, with testimony, with a verdict spoken clearly into record. But my peace began somewhere else. It began the moment I chose not to respond to her last letter, not to argue, not to defend, not to reopen the wound. Silence in that moment wasn't avoidance. It was boundary, and boundaries are stronger than revenge. That night, as I locked the door and turned off the lights, I didn't look over my shoulder. I didn't replay the hospital. I didn't replay the courtroom. I simply walked upstairs and slept. For the first time in months, without dreaming of poison. The first warm day of spring arrived without announcement. No snow, no frost, just sunlight pouring through the kitchen window and the sound of birds settling in the trees behind the house. I stood at the sink, rinsing coffee from my mug, and realized I hadn't thought about poison in days. That felt like progress. Ethan stepped out onto the porch with a box of old paperwork we had finally decided to shred. Bank statements, insurance copies, court transcripts. "Ready?" he asked. "Yes." We fed the papers through the shredder one stack at a time. The machine hummed steadily, reducing months of fear into thin, harmless strips. There's something symbolic about watching documents disappear. Not denial, completion. When the box was empty, Ethan leaned back in the porch chair and exhaled. "It's strange," he said, "how loud everything felt, and now it's quiet." "Loud doesn't last," I replied, "but consequences do." He nodded slowly. The house behind us didn't feel like evidence anymore. It felt like inheritance in the truest sense. Not money, not insurance, not property, responsibility. My father had trusted me with more than a will. He trusted me to protect what mattered. I thought about Madison sitting in a cell somewhere far from Oregon, concrete walls, narrow windows, structured days. I no longer imagined her pacing or plotting. I imagined routine, reality, time doing what it always does, moving forward without asking permission. Lily arrived that afternoon with a backpack and a tentative smile. "I brought my sketchbook," she said. "Show me," I replied. We sat at the kitchen table where months ago the world had tilted sideways. She flipped through pages of mountains and trees and houses with smoke rising from chimneys. "You draw a lot of windows," I observed. "I like light," she said simply. I smiled. "That's good." She looked up at me carefully. "Dad says you're not angry anymore." I considered that. "I'm not living in anger," I said. "That's different," she nodded. "Mom writes me," she added quietly. "I know. She says you don't understand her." I didn't rush to answer. "Understanding someone doesn't mean excusing them," I said finally. Lily absorbed that slowly. "Will she ever come back?" she asked. "Yes," I said. "But by then you'll be grown." She looked down at her drawing. "I don't want to be bitter," she whispered. "You won't be," I said. "Bitterness grows when you feed it. You don't have to." We baked cookies again, laughter rising easily this time. The kitchen felt like a place for warmth instead of tension. Later, after Lily left, I walked into the study one last time. The safe door stood open. Inside lay my father's notebook and the original will. I picked up the notebook and read the line I had memorized months ago. Resentment compounds faster than interest. He had written it like a financial truth. It turned out to be a life truth. Madison's resentment had compounded quietly for years. Mine had stopped the moment I chose not to carry it forward. That's the difference. Ethan leaned against the doorframe. "You're saying goodbye to the battlefield," he said. "Yes." He stepped closer. "You didn't win," he added gently. "No," I agreed. "I survived." "And you stopped it," he said. "Yes." Stopping something destructive is quieter than winning. It doesn't come with applause, it comes with space. Space to breathe, space to sleep, space to choose differently. That night, as the sun dipped behind the trees, I sat on the porch alone. The air smelled like damp earth and new growth. I thought about the moment Madison handed me the bottle after our father's funeral. She had called it a peace offering. Peace doesn't come in glass bottles. Peace comes in boundaries. Peace comes in truth spoken under oath. Peace comes in refusing to normalize betrayal. I no longer replayed the scene with anger. I replayed it with clarity. Her eyes had been too intent, her questions too pointed. "Did you drink any?" Instinct had whispered before evidence shouted. That instinct saved my life. If there is one thing I carry forward, it is that. Trust the quiet voice before the crisis forces you to listen. I don't hate my sister. Hate would tether me to her. I don't feel victorious. Victory implies someone had to lose. This was never about scorekeeping. It was about ending a cycle of jealousy that had been building since childhood. Money amplified it, but it didn't create it. What created it was comparison left unchallenged. If you've ever felt like the responsible one, if you've ever carried the weight while someone else blamed you for standing upright, if you've ever been told you were lucky simply because you endured, you understand this story. Survival is not arrogance, boundaries are not cruelty, and accountability is not revenge. It is protection, protection of your life, your peace, your future. Madison believed fairness meant equal distribution regardless of behavior. She never understood that fairness includes consequence. Blood does not guarantee loyalty. Family does not guarantee safety. And sometimes the battlefield isn't a desert overseas. Sometimes it's a kitchen after a funeral. The war ends the moment you refuse to participate in destruction. I stood from the porch and locked the door once. Not twice, once. The house felt warm behind me, stable, alive. I turned off the lights and walked upstairs. As I lay in bed, I didn't see a courtroom. I didn't hear a verdict. I didn't hear glass shattering. I heard quiet. And that quiet felt earned. If this story stayed with you, if it reminded you of a moment when you had to choose boundaries over blood, I'd like to hear it. Leave a comment. Tell me where you drew your line. And if you're still standing after something that tried to break you, stay here. Subscribe. Because sometimes surviving isn't the end of the story. It's the beginning of choosing differently. And that choice, every single time, is what keeps us free.